Hello, and welcome to Blockchange Solidarity, the podcast where we ask what blockchain can do for us. What is blockchain? What is crypto? Can it rescue us from our current dystopia? Come with us as we explore the very real potential for this technology to enhance human freedom, and as we delve into the darker side and explore the Bond villain potential of this current bleeding edge. Join us, a group of friends in a pub-style chat as we discuss the overlaps between this technology and politics, economics, the environment, culture and sci-fi, to understand for ourselves this seemingly mysterious, futuristic world on our horizon.
Hey everyone, it's Alex. Just taking a second away from the chat to say thank you again for joining us on this journey. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us on our Patreon. We've put the link in the description. Times are very tough out there, so you can also help us in other ways, such as sharing or liking our content on social media, rating our podcast on iTunes, or just spreading the word about our project to your friends and networks. We've put all of these links in the description. Help us build the people system with blockchain. Now, let's get back to the chat.
Of billionaire ownership of their sports clubs, but mostly football in the UK. And me especially, my club, Manchester United, is just like, oh my God, we're owned by billionaire Yankee Doodles, the same guys that own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which you guys are probably familiar with. Tom Brady, I think, plays for them. But
we
might do an episode.
Just buy an ad for it. I saw someone tweet about Ronaldo.
Yeah, that's us. He's also our main shirt sponsor.
Oh yeah. That was them then.
Yeah.
Wait, that means
I don't even know too much about
United
Tezos.
has Ronaldo right now.
We have Ronaldo. I love how you say it too. Ronaldo.
I'm today years old.
That's right. The second best football player in the world.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Things are so hard for Man U, huh? You're owned by a oligarchy, and you have Ronaldo on your team.
Yeah, he wants
like
to
hearing
leave though,
billionaires complain about their lives. Oh my gosh.
Make no mistake, dude, they are not my team. That's why I like to point out that they only have the second best football player in the world.
Yeah.
Apparently, if you're a Man United fan, that is a massive insult and it gets you dead upset.
Yeah, I just assumed that, like, the first best team in the world was someone like Barcelona or something, Steve. You mean Bolton? Yeah, you're trying to say Bolton are number one?
Don't get me wrong, I'm not pretending my team's the best in the world. I'm just saying there's a better player than Ronaldo out there and doesn't play for Manchester United.
Who's that?
Obviously, it's Lionel Messi, the only person who's ahead of him on the bracket.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's debatable. It's debatable. Both of them are past
It is debatable. It is indeed debatable, but it has to be brought up.
It does have to be brought up. There's many other, like there's the guy called Kylian Mbappe that people would probably say he's probably number one. But he actually, speaking of Messi, he had a fight with I think it was Messi or Neymar. He had a fight with his teammates over a penalty kick. They kind of like were handbags at dawn, sort of slapping at each other. Who's going to take the penalty? So, footballers these days, pampered idiots. That's what I say.
It could be worse, Alex. He could write poetry like Ryan Giggs.
Yeah. So, oh God, let's not go down that route, Steve. We'll need Dude, that's just not
moving swiftly on.
But moving swiftly on, we need to put a parental advisory explicit content on the recording. Oh my God. So that's a bit of business for everyone keeping up with our episodes. But today we're going live. We're going to talk about what we feel is like a really prescient, like topical issue right now in the crypto world. and just in the world anyway. And it's been like, it is one of the central themes to our episodes, freedom, and what, the utopia versus dystopia dynamic. And we wanted to dedicate an episode to the freedom that crypto can bring and blockchain can bring. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today: freedom of speech, freedom of protest, and how Bitcoin especially has played such a central role since its inception right up to the present day in securing freedoms. And then we're going to talk a little bit about other cryptocurrencies except for Bitcoin. Aside from Bitcoin, that's privacy coin that's called Monero. You're all probably aware of it. And then we're going to talk about decentralized social media as a potentially new platform where we can actually gather and get away from corporations in the States. So, but the first thing we're going to talk about is Wikileaks and Bitcoin. It's like the oldest use case of one of the first use cases of Bitcoin.
First
At
least.
Well, first anti-imperialist leftist use case, and we have an article here that we're going to go on, and I don't know, you guys, you've read the article. Like, it opens up. I'm just going to bring it up here because it's really interesting. Like, I'll just read out this first paragraph because I think it's just so fascinating. So, so here we go. I'll read out this first paragraph. I want you guys, what do you think about this? So it says, one of the last posts Bitcoin creator Satoshi Nakamoto wrote before he disappeared made a direct reference to the emerging story of WikiLeaks. He says, the project needs to grow gradually. He's talking about Bitcoin. So the software can be strengthened along the way. I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to try to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a small beta community in its infancy. You would not stand to get more than pocket change, and the heat you would bring would likely destroy us at this stage, he wrote in 2010. So I think that's pretty interesting. I didn't know about that before, but a lot of our audience might not. Here's the guy that created Bitcoin, this elusive, or girl, who knows, Satoshi Nakamoto, who swiftly after this disappeared into the wilderness, never to be seen again. And here he is saying, WikiLeaks, stay away from Bitcoin. What do you guys think about that? Were you there at the time when this was coming out, or just even knowing that? What do you guys think about that? It's pretty fascinating, isn't it?
I was not around for that, but I do think that Satoshi was probably a group of people.
Seconded.
The common theory is Hal Finney.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said seconded.
Yeah, and the common theory is, and Vitalik agrees, is that it was Hal Finney. But like, I mean, that was a big deal. To people that, I mean, it wasn't a big deal to not very many people because it was a long time ago when Bitcoin was in its infancy. But like, yeah, I would say that there's a comparison to be made with Ethereum too, where there's a few developers that'll talk about how like, yeah, like the amount of projects that were built on our system as fast as it did, like, kind of made our life very difficult when it comes to developing it properly.
Freaking crypto.
And I imagine, yeah.
Classic.
So Satoshi was very smart in seeing that was going to be a problem and like saying it too. But who knows?
It wouldn't even be the least of his
anything,
problems though with the Silk Road.
Yeah, but also, if anything, he probably made it worse just by bringing more attention to it, too.
Exactly, yeah.
That's kind of the point Satoshi was trying to make, though, isn't it? And I was around at the time. I was vaguely aware of the stuff that was happening. WikiLeaks was dropping massive public bundles, including things like the names and locations of all spies the US had in intelligence assets across the world. And obviously this could be read by the Taliban and whatnot at the time. So it was it Al Qaeda back then was the baddie, the boogeyman. So literally, Julian Assange put massive files containing the names, ages, and locations and photos of US intelligence assets into the hands of Al Qaeda. And Satoshi Nakamoto was going, whoa, this is going to pan out badly, which it obviously is going to do if you're screwing with the establishment to that level, right? At the same time, you have other stuff happening, like the Silk Road. And basically, you know what? All of this boils down to one thing and one thing only. And this is going to be a theme that will keep coming up throughout the topics tonight. And it's this dead simple premise. There are some things that we have to put a stop to, right? And I'm not being the arbiter of what those things are, but I'm sure we all agree there are some things that must be stopped. And only the most ardent, purist, free market ideology would persuade you to argue, no, everything you can possibly think of is an okay financial economic transaction. No, there has to be some line where we say no to something. And all of this, half of the stuff we're discussing tonight, is about deciding where that line should be and who should have the power to draw that line, right?
So just so I understand, you're saying like when it comes to freedom of transactions, or I assume just transactions for now, there should be some things that that somebody, I don't know who it is, especially in this crypto world because it's decentralized. I don't know who makes that choice. I guess communities can decide that within their own coins which transactions should be allowed on their chain. It's up to them, I guess.
Well,
is that what you're saying though? Those communities will decide.
What I'm saying is certain things shouldn't be allowed. Let's give an example of buying and selling portable nuclear bombs, right? So if I put a suitcase nuke on eBay and you buy it with some laundered crypto, right, that shouldn't be allowed. It just shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't be able to get a mail order suitcase nuke. I think you'd have to be insane to argue otherwise, right? So there are some things, that's just an example off the top of my head, that we have to say no to for the good of humanity. Are you with me? And it's all about where we draw that line. So, somebody somewhere would probably want to sell that. I mean, there's a story about, was it a Pakistani intelligence asset who was working for the US government and gave Pakistan nuclear weapons. I'm not deciding whether that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, one man shouldn't be able to just give nuclear capability to a country like that. Is that in our best interests? I mean, on eBay, for example, it'd be a very bad idea, wouldn't it?
Oh, you dropped out.
Steve's dropped out.
And Bemke's
you dropped out there.
Oh.
Bemke's muted, but you're still here. You just dropped out for 5 seconds, Steve. I see what you're saying, Steve. But let me ask you this. I mean, this is a rabbit hole we could go down endlessly. But let me ask you this. And then we'll have to bring it back to like WikiLeaks here a little bit. But I see what you're saying. But my problem with that is that's a slippery slope. And who first of all, who decides it? And then if you have like overarching for the whole globe, then that's kind of centralization and all colonialism questions and all the rest of it. But isn't there a way to stop people selling and having nuclear weapons in their hands before you start putting restrictions and regulations on financial transactions? Like, shouldn't we just make sure that nuclear weapons aren't proliferated and get into the hands?
Yes, we should, but this is the thing. This is exactly the thing. The black market exists to try and circumvent the rules that we put in place, and then somebody will make a transaction through laundered currency that is off the grid, i.e. a washable cryptocurrency is a prime example of a way of doing this. So that, say, a mixer that completely obfuscates the transaction. This is the point I'm making, right? You don't know what illegal activity is behind that. You just don't, right? That's the whole purpose of washing it like you do. Now, I'm not making a value judgment on this. I'm not. What I'm saying is there are some things that we need to stop in humanity's interest. And how do you do that? This is perhaps, well, I'm not saying it's a good approach, but it is perhaps one of the only ways it can be done. I don't know, I'm no expert on that. What I'm saying is you shouldn't be able to buy and sell human beings or nuclear weapons or a few other things, right? You shouldn't be able to get mail order children or mail order nuclear weapons. I'm sure we all agree that shouldn't be allowed. And you don't know what these transactions are doing. That's the whole purpose of mixing them up like that, right? You don't know what the criminals behind it are, but whoever's made their list, you would imagine are nasty, horrible gangsters and terrorists, or you would hope they are. The point is, I don't know enough about it to say at what level that's been done, so I can't make a value judgment.
So I think the where you draw the line and is a little bit less important to me in terms of how you draw the line. I think if you do it in a decentralized, democratic consensus manner of there's this
Right.
self-regulatory, there's this emergent property where everyone, right, in a cooperative mutualist manner creates the applications that combat, and you can imagine all the nonviolent means that blockchain has of keeping accountable and transparent. One, you can think you do want people to transact nuclear bombs, and you want it to be on a public, transparent, and accountable blockchain, and you want to know where it is in real time. That would be in the interest of everybody, right? So you can think of where blockchain flipped around.
If you could track every nuclear weapon in the world, that'd be great, right?
Exactly. So you can imagine that would be the flip side of you wanting it. And then, okay, anyone who's doing the zero knowledge, Tumblr method of privately obtaining nuclear weapons. Well, how do we combat those people? So how do we disincentivize? How do we cooperate with each other to make sure, okay, we're not going to let those kind of applications run on our chain, right? You can't really do the thing where you prevent them from ever getting built. I think America tries to be a try to perform this preventative justice, but you can't prevent the crime. You can only after the fact try to regenerate, redeem, and basically make whole everything that went wrong. So people are going to transact. Russia and Venezuela already do huge oil transactions in Bitcoin. And that is to the chagrin of the Federal Reserve and the International Monetary Fund, right? They do not like that they can get around sanctions like that. And whereas before they would just use giant tankers full of hundreds of millions of dollars shoved in a shipping container, and they would actually have to spend a little percentage more because, one, you got to pay to ship it. Two, there's cash that literally gets eaten away by rats and water. So there's pros and cons, but ultimately, I think when you bring stuff on chain and you bring people's accountability there, you get better end results.
Yeah, and just to cut in here before we go into maybe let's maybe park this for now and come back to this a little later, because we're going to be talking about network states versus network societies, and that will inevitably bring us into questions of like how do communities sort of decide sort of what's transacted or what goes on in their digital communities and across communities and how that works. And these inevitable questions of even, is there some things that, overarching all communities, all network societies online should sort of agree on, that nothing like what Steve's example or the selling of people can happen. And this is presuming that we get past states. So maybe nuclear weapons in a digital network society world doesn't have the need for nuclear weapons. But let's park it for now. Come back to that a little bit later and jump back. I wanted to ask.
I just want to mention one thing about Monero before we move on real quick. The IRS was actually posting a bounty for contractors that could develop tools to help trace Monero.
Really?
In September. Yeah, 625K. And
the great irony of
contract
this,
was
though,
awarded to two blockchain analysis groups called Chain Analysis and Integra FEC.
And the great irony of this is you can do it with cash.
Right.
Yeah,
You can perform all the same functions with just pieces of paper that people value, right?
Yeah. It's just, a matter of who's got central control of it.
Yeah, I think the post hoc giving people disincentives, incentives, accountability is kind of the more ample move here than trying to think of how do we make sure this doesn't happen. Rather think, okay, assuming it happens, what do we do? What are the ways that we can bring down those inevitabilities we don't want, right?
So focusing on WikiLeaks. Let's go back to their story because it's so important, and it leads us on to the next case, just how government right now, never mind what could happen, what they're doing right now to crush dissent and try to close down information that they don't like. So back in 2011, WikiLeaks was getting money through PayPal and through pressure that the US government put on Visa, MasterCard, Amazon Web Services, basically shut WikiLeaks' ability to exist down. So they moved to Bitcoin, and Julian Assange later said that he had a 5,000 return on Bitcoin. So it was so helpful to keep the lights on at WikiLeaks. And, people are probably wondering, what have WikiLeaks done? Or, give us a bit of information about why WikiLeaks is so important. And Steve alluded to it there. I don't know if you guys can remember this, but, they released secret files about Guantanamo Bay, secret correspondence from the Syrian government, Saudi Arabian diplomatic cables, information on the corporate Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. And then later they released the CIA documents that said that the agency, as we all know now, can hack into our smartphones, computers, and basically listen in whenever they want to anything. And if you've read Edward Snowden's book, holy crap, that is scary. So these guys WikiLeaks have done. What? You've got it right next to you?
His book, I got it right next to me. It's I've only read part of it, but it scares the hell out of me.
It's fascinating. There's one piece of that where basically he describes that I think it's CIA or NSA agents. If they were bored on a Wednesday night in the agency or whatever, they would just they had the ability to type in something or look up this Indian diplomat, and it would bring up a webcam of the Indian diplomat sitting at home with his child on his knee, and they would just sit and play these games and spy on whoever they want. That's in Snowden's book. Freaked the hell out of me. But WikiLeaks it's done so much important. Would we have had any of those releases without Bitcoin? That's the question. Would WikiLeaks exist if we didn't have Bitcoin? What do you think, Alchemist?
No, WikiLeaks would not
Well,
have been able.
Answer.
Yeah.
I can answer it. Yeah, it would exist because it did exist before it transferred to Bitcoin. It just wouldn't have got as far as it did, would it?
Yeah, but it would.
Right. As far as it went.
But yeah, the point is they tried to close it. They would have been successful in closing it down, Steve, if they didn't have an alternative into Bitcoin. No?
Yeah, I think their capabilities and how far and fast they were able to take themselves was exponentially amplified by the, obviously if WikiLeaks had invested in some penny stock that went up 5,000%, it would have done the same thing for WikiLeaks. So yes,
That's what I was about to
we
say.
love Bitcoin for what it did, but that was just a great investment opportunity that Julian Assange capitalized on. And I think
I have to ask.
Mhm.
Is a part
No,
of
I'm
that
not
the
sure.
fact that
Like,
he was like stuck in an embassy for ages and it went up 5,000% because
Yeah,
he couldn't
true.
access it or spend it?
50,000%.
50, yeah, that sounds better.
50,000% because he
Oh,
sat in
I have-
Ecuadorian in embassy for years.
I have 5,000. I don't know. Maybe you guys have 50,000. I have
Is it
5,000.
5? I thought it was 50.
Yeah.
Well,
Either way,
might
I
be
still, I have.
the price. Maybe the 5,000 is the average, and the price that it was at when he first started using Bitcoin, it might be 50,000 because it went up to 50K, and it was definitely at and below.
Right, you
$1.
might.
Oh,
this
you're right, Becky.
this
You're right.
article
You're
is
right,
3
it
years
is
old, so
50,000.
now it's 50. Yeah.
Cool.
But I wouldn't be
Alchemist,
surprised
just to
if the
pick up on
average
a-
wound up being like 5.
He still want to spend that Bitcoin, of course, because he's not been a free man, has he?
No, he's not.
Somebody-
He's in that beautiful oasis over next to Cuba. Yeah, it's this gorgeous resort. I've heard lots of great reviews. Guantanamo Bay. Have you guys been?
I've heard of it. It's right near the Bay of Pigs, isn't it?
Yeah, I
No,
hear they give
it's not in
lots of
Guantanamo Bay.
massages, lots of spa treatments. It's pretty crazy lit over there, like an Ibiza for you Europeans.
He's not in Guantanamo Bay. He's locked up in the UK's most feared.
He hasn't
prison.
gotten an extradited.
Yeah.
Well, was he not extradited to Sweden?
But Alchemist, I just wanted to pick up on what you just said. You think if he had invested, or people had donated penny stocks or stocks, that
they wouldn't have been able to.
WikiLeaks
No.
No, they wouldn't have been able to. The point is, like, if they had any other means that could have been closed down by the government, they wouldn't exist right now, right? Whether that be anything in TradFi. So,
So
Bitcoin saved Wikileaks.
because of capitalism, because of the overwhelming force of the bourgeois class to coordinate in solidarity with each other, they clapped Julian Assange's ass, man. They know how to move in unison together and for the mutual benefit of their fellow class members. So yeah, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, every bank account, every web service thing he was trying to. So he had to go to the only free place that would welcome him, and it was the decentralized, permissionless ledger that is Bitcoin. And that's pretty wild and crazy that the capitalism as its mechanisms of control come the decade before Bitcoin, that would have been the end of a WikiLeaks project. And had anything else gone, I mean, I can't imagine the same thing being able to be accomplished in the 90s, right?
No, there was no
and I don't
viable alternative to Bitcoin at the time either, I recall. Maybe like had Ethereum started at that point?
No.
Yeah, but
Wait,
crypto
what year?
maybe is the
Ethereum started in 2014, I believe, and got pretty big in 2015-16.
So maybe the point here is that it was maybe crypto, maybe a non-Bitcoin crypto could have saved them. Other people would argue that only Bitcoin has that. We'll maybe get onto that question in a second when we move on to the sort of Bitcoin versus Monero and how private are these coins. But I just wanted to read out this.
Well, even
because I
Bitcoin
think
was kind of private then, just because no one knew how to trace it at the time, or
back
no one
then,
that cared. But now, everybody and their mother can trace a Bitcoin transaction.
It was still sold on the fact that it had a public ledger, even from the outset. So it was never pretended to be anything else.
Yeah, it always said
Monero
proposed to
wouldn't need
be
to exist.
pseudo-anonymous.
Yeah.
So I just want to read this bit out, guys, to see what you think about this. This article, it says, WikiLeaks saved an emerging Bitcoin community from excessive political pressure. and heat its creator did not think it would survive. In turn, Bitcoin saved WikiLeaks from plunging into financial dissolution thanks to a US-based financial and services blockade that looked to tear it down, a legacy it continues through Bitcoin donations to Assange's legal defense fund. And here's my question to you guys. Julian Assange, I don't know if you're aware of this, he's been quoted as saying, or he's said, that Bitcoin is the real Occupy Wall Street, referring to how Bitcoin could displace the same financial, political, banking institutions protesters were furious about but couldn't change. What do you guys think? Is Bitcoin, Bitcoin the real Occupy?
Mr. Robot. Did anybody watch Mr. Robot?
Oh yeah, I love Mr. Robot.
What was it?
I'm aware of what it is. I have not seen.
Was it about the same time? Was that about the same time, Mr. Robot?
Could well be.
The same time? No, it was Mr. Robot was later than 08 for sure.
But it all came flooding back.
Very much
the
inspired
1%ers. What was it? We are the 99% or whatever it was.
Yeah, they were
What
definitely
was the
taken
point
from
of
like
it, Steve?
Anonymous.
Steve, do you want to articulate what that was about, or what was it?
There was basically a massive movement after the global financial crash of 2008, where basically the global resolution to that was massive state bailouts of private industry, and then engage in austerity. So like the working man had to pay the bills for all the rich people who'd messed up, gambling, and they were gambling. It was subprime mortgage lending that started in the States, and it was all about neoliberal deregulation. So they deregulated financial services to the point that they were just basically gambling, and then the entire subprime mortgage industry collapsed, and then Lehman Brothers went under, and then there's just started the dollars flew. At the UK, the US, there was absolutely vast, truly unimaginable, like unprecedented bank bailouts, and then the public were told that we'd all have to tighten up our belts to pay it off.
You're describing, Steve, the financial crash, which a lot of people will be aware of. My question there was like, what your point about Mr. Robot? What was the specific Mr. Robot's comparison?
Sorry, I was just getting there when you stopped me. But the backlash to that was the protest movement. So they were basically the Occupy Wall Street, and there's something, if I recall correctly, 1% or 99%. There was a line, "We are the 99%," and the people who were like holding banners outside like all these financial institutions. This went on for some time, creating a big fuss. Anyway, that is what Mr. Robot was about. Only what he did was he found a way as a hacker to destabilize and collapse the establishment payment system. So you're talking about all the credit card firms, and wiped all the debt globally from the computer system.
He fight clubbed the entire financial system.
It was amazing. It's worth a watch as well, because the guy's a great character. Rami Malek,
and
that's right.
Did he try and replace it with any sort of alternative currency like crypto?
They ended up replacing it with a cryptocurrency. The centralized corporations, after all their data was deleted, that's what they ended up doing.
Yeah. By the way, if anyone wants a good thing to watch to understand the financial crisis, The Big Short by Adam McKay. It's a great movie.
Great movie.
It's hilarious.
It was gambling.
So let's wrap.
Basically.
Well, and it was also the bond ratings. Everything was AA rated, but then you went on into the inside of the stock and realized, oh, this is a stripper with 4 rental houses. How is she paying off all these mortgages? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they were being paid by the same people that they were rating. So it was set up to be like, it can't be more corrupt than that.
Kind of like the FDA with the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like almost anything, really. I mean,
yeah, pretty much everything works that way.
It's like it's all of it, yeah.
And that, ladies and
Why crypto
gentlemen,
so
is
awesome.
liberalism in a nutshell.
Yep.
It was
there you
all
go.
legal.
And this is all
It wasn't
legal.
criminal at all.
Trying to work within that pile
Liberalism
of
and
garbage is what liberalism is all about.
So moving on from this article, I think and moving on to the next part here, like just a nice transition.
Before he's sent to the U.S. But yeah,
he says
he'll be there for a while.
Yeah, the end of this article says, the fact remains that for those who believe in the fundamental tenet of true net neutrality and non-violent content free from censorship through business incentives or through government force, Wikileaks is the Pentagon Papers of our age, the trial case that will define how wide internet freedom truly stretches. And in this effort, Wikileaks has saved Bitcoin and been saved by Bitcoin in return. So I think that sums it up well, right? No comment. Yeah. So let's move on to the truckers case, because it's like a more recent example. It's a more recent example in the last 2 or 3 years of Bitcoin being used to secure freedom. And I wanted to read out the first paragraph of this article, right? Because I don't know if there's a better paragraph that sums up utopia versus dystopia. So get this. This is how it goes, right? It's almost like they meant it this way. It says, on January 22nd, a convoy of Canadian long-haul trucks left the port city of Prince Rupert, British Columbia, and arrived in nearby Prince George. The next day, another group of trucks traveled from Delta, British Columbia, to a section of the Trans-Canada Highway. By the end of the month, some 3,000 trucks and other vehicles, accompanied by more than 15,000 protesters, had converged in the country's capital of Ottawa, blocking its streets and calling itself the Freedom Convoy. The city's police promptly launched a criminal investigation into their assembly. It's like people coming around Canada for a protest together, and the city's police, their first thing was to launch a criminal investigation just into their gathering, you know? Like, if that doesn't show you just how, like, the state just wants to crush anything, like, as soon as they can, like, they did it so quick, you know? What do you guys remember of this trucker protest? What can you remember of it?
I mean, well,
Steve.
I know a lot of people are pissed that they can't get their stuff. Other than that, it's hard to really comment on it, because it's like the situation sucks. You see everybody's point to some degree. I mean, some of them, you know, they don't have a point other than just being upset about a whole bunch of stuff. But I don't know. It's weird looking at some of the demographics of truck. Like, I was just looking at statistics for truckers. Like, they have a shortage of 22,000 drivers, and by 2024 they're going to have a shortage of 34,000 drivers in Canada,
right,
according to CBC. So these people are probably paid pretty well, and it seems like they're able to take no pay for a long period of time to do this. And other than that, like, it doesn't really seem like they're much different than any other set of labor organization of labor.
It's a strike, isn't it? It's people aggrieved with some issue and withdrawing their labour and making a protest. It's actually a combination of a few things. It's different to a strike because it wasn't employment conditions and it wasn't organised by a union. It was more of an ad hoc thing that blew up around it. But it was ostensibly a workers' protest to protest and air specific grievances, very much like strikes. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I mean, I'm always going to be in favour of the public's right to protest and to air grievances against the government, right? That is always a given that needs to be protected. And I have some experience with organising protests, ad hoc ones, to specific grievances. And it's a strategy that works, but they didn't just do the strike, they didn't just set up a picket. They set out to disrupt the economy and trade around major economic hubs. So they did it, and they knew that they were going to cost small mom and pop businesses as much as they were the big corporations, right? They knew that going out,
Yeah, it's
right? And they
isn't
went
it
out
almost like
anyway.
militant anarchist, right? Like it's very old school anarchist.
Well, in
Yeah,
this
I mean,
in this article, I wanted to ask you guys about this because I didn't know this until I read the article. Because I thought this, like, that's why I asked, what do you guys think of the truckers? What did you think at the time when they were protesting over? I mean, I think we were told at the time it was largely at the start vaccine mandates, which I think it was, but it was more than that as it went on, or when we scratched the surface a bit more. And this article kind of brings it out a little bit. I didn't know this. Like, I don't know if you guys did. But for yonks, for a lot of time, like the Canadian government had been putting like really sinister regulations and taxes on these guys. Like it's a little bit similar, you could say, to the Dutch farmers and all the rest of it. Like neoliberalism has a way and has done. It's put like a system on truckers, a system on farmers, and then when it wants to change, when the elites want to change the system, they penalize the people at the bottom, whether it be like us or like farmers or truckers. Through they always tax the people at the bottom. They never tax the corporations, you know. And these in this
Right.
article it says that the truckers were endlessly getting, there was like taxes after taxes, gas prices, gas taxes, and they were like, God, when is it going to be enough? And then they said like the straw that broke the camel's back, as they just to finish this point, like they said like the straw that broke the camel's back was they weren't against the vaccine. In fact, they say a lot of them, or most of them, were actually vaccinated. It was the mandates, and they even went on to say like whenever you cross the border from the US to Canada or Canada to the US, they were being surveilled, and so where was it, like, yeah, somewhere here, like they said, like, yeah, most of us are vaccinated. It was the mandates, the lack of choice. Border agents had tracked his vaccine status by surveilling his phone within a certain vicinity of the US border as he drove back home. And he said, if that's the case, then we have a completely tracked and surveilled society. Like, this is crazy where we're going. We've got to stop this now, or we'll end up with papers, please, boy, every time you cross the border. So this is like, we're heading towards like this, the surveillance capitalism state, isn't it? This is like penalizing the little guy with taxes, but also tracking him everywhere. Like, you know, it's scary. I didn't realize this was going on. Did you guys?
well, my first thought there is, if I'm crossing a border between any two neighbouring countries, I would largely expect to have to show some papers, right? Maybe not between the UK and Wales, England and Wales, or
Well, it's supposed to be
England
the
and
same
Scotland,
with
right?
Canada and America, though, you know?
Yeah.
But it isn't.
Yeah, and I think
it's the same between. It's the same between Florida and I don't know, Louisiana. Is that one of the next states over? That's the same as like England and Scotland. But America and Canada are different countries. It's like America and
Steve,
Mexico. You cross the border, you show your papers, right?
You're maybe missing the point, though, Steve. The point was that they didn't ask at the border, show us your papers. It was they had surveilled him and knew that they could stop him because they knew even before he'd arrived at the border that he didn't have a vaccine status, you know, through surveilling his phone. This is the deep CIA, NSA, how they do it that we spoke about earlier. They were able to totally surveil him. So it's like a deepening of state surveillance that, you know, the border agents in the state know everything about you before you even arrived on the scene, you know?
And just think
That's
of how
creepy.
that level of surveillance, he has to be boosted. He has to do this, making
Right.
all this more arduous work, right? To be a laborer, and that's just their ultimately. I think they must be heating up the pressure on truckers because we are moving to automation. I don't foresee in the next few decades that we'll be physically with a driver in everything be moving supplies. So maybe that's what they have in the back of their minds going on. Let's surveil and make sure.
Even road building, like all kinds of construction jobs too. Like it's insane.
And we don't need
the idea of driverless haulage just jars with me. For me, you need a human operator. Okay, so we've had a similar issue with trains in the UK. So they want to remove the guards and put them on driver-only operations, so that the driver opens and closes the doors, but then there's no one there to do safety drills. So like if the train breaks down outside the station, the driver can't leave, so he can't escort the passengers off. Or if there's a fire, or if somebody collapses, the driver can't leave his cab. He can't deal with that. So it's a safety issue, and I'm firmly of the position you need a human being to deal with things if things go wrong, and it's the same be it a freight train, a passenger train, or a haulage truck. Now, I was going to say before, I have a lot of sympathy for taxi drivers in the UK because they are put upon. They have to pay outrageous insurance, fuel costs are through the roof. Then they have to pay the operator for like a CB radio.
Steve,
the costs are massive.
Steve, buddy, you're breaking in and out a lot.
The point is the costs are massive, and if it's the same for haulage operators plus the paperwork, I completely empathise with how put upon they are.
Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
can you hear me
up,
okay?
I think, Alex.
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear him.
So, just a break.
I think you were cutting out, though.
Was it me breaking up, or was it Steve? For me, it was Steve.
You're more breaking up for me.
I could hear Steve.
So, for Alchemist, I was breaking up.
You're okay now.
Was Steve...
Yeah.
Okay, but was Steve breaking up for anybody else but me?
A little, but not much.
Okay.
Not much.
It was weird. I was trying to interrupt you there, Steve, to tell you were breaking up, but you didn't.
No worries.
I didn't catch. Maybe you guys can answer what Steve was saying, because I didn't catch any of it, but feel free to bounce off what he said.
Yeah, Bimke, if you want to go first.
So that train situation was really interesting there. I'd like to talk more about that after the pod, but I think he made his point. I don't know. You have anything more to add, Steve?
No, it was just that taxi drivers are really put upon in the UK. They have ever increasing burdens. And the thing about driving is it's a livelihood that can be easily taken away from you. I'm a firm believer that if you spend enough hours doing something, an accident will happen in the end. So if you climb a ladder 1,000 times, the chance of you slipping once increases exponentially, doesn't it? And it's the same when you drive down the road, mistakes will be made. And eventually, if you've driven several thousand hours, you'll have an accident and you might get 3 points on your license. If that happens enough as a professional driver, you can't get insured and you can't work, How many situations can you think of where just going to work risks you not being able to work anymore? It's on your head, that, not your employer.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest factors in deciding to go automated is your risk of being sued or having to compensate medically for, at least in the United States, for somebody that gets hurt on the job. So I imagine that that's going to play a major role in the United States moving to automation versus most other industrialized countries, since they have, already have universal health care and for the most part. And the United States relies on its ever concentrating corporations.
Yeah, I think Canada and America are kind of perfect examples of, our unionization rate has fallen so much since the 50s and 60s, and I think all of this is kind of just boiling up evidence of our lack of organization and coordination between each other, and it could all be solved if we cooperated more between each other. You know.
So let's
they've
bring it back
effectively
to
demonized
let's
unions.
bring it back to yeah. I mean, let's try and bring it back to like because we could delve into like automation.
So
and
there's
all
this
the rest of it,
crypto
but
thing called the Labor DAO, and they are focused on making unions, and so boom, made it crypto.
yeah. So but bring it back to the structures thing. Like let's just bring our audience back who might not be too familiar with all these like deeper concepts. Like and just like they're wondering how we went from like the trucker protest to this. Like, let's bring it all together for them in a way. Like, we're all agreed that like workers, including these truckers, or the farmers, all have legitimate concerns, and that's only getting worse with automation and all the rest of it. So there's issues there, and the Canadian government tried to close them down. And so how they did this actually was to cut off their financial supply. So same as WikiLeaks, they closed down the GoFundMe, which had raised like millions, and it's so sinister in how they did this. Corporations like GoFundMe, which is a company, corporation, or a business or whatever, worked hand in glove with the Canadian government to shut these payment channels down. What do we call it, guys? Like, what's the word for corporations working hand in fist with the government? Do we have a word for that?
Fascism.
Tesla?
We allowed to say it? Fascism? Is that it?
That's fascism, right? That's fascism.
It's Benito Mussolini who said that.
Yeah, it is.
What exactly was the phrase? It was fascism should rightly be called a merger between state and corporate power, I think was the phrase. He
Right,
said.
that is exactly it. I remember that myself. And do you want to hear like just how sinister this is? Like, this is what GoFundMe. This is the excuse they give for closing down the trucker protest. They said they demanded from the truckers evidence to show that their money wasn't being used in support of violence. So you've broken our terms of conditions by not showing us upon request how your money's not being. So it's like it's not even that GoFundMe like could prove it. They asked for the truckers to prove that it was. So it's almost like guilty before innocence. You know, like that's really screwed.
Can't prove a negative, can you?
What?
Yeah. And
Can't prove a negative, can you?
Can't prove a negative. Yeah, it's like you're guilty before they've even got
yeah,
you.
I think it's crazy
And then yeah,
that they like Kraken and Coinbase, they were both like ordered to freeze accounts, right? And like a bunch of all of them, all the exchanges, and I think if I remember correctly, the Kraken CEO said, you guys should go look for decentralized services because there's a chance that the government's going to freeze the accounts, and then like I think it happened right after. It was something like that, and that's good on him, but shit.
it's scary. Yeah. And then it was even more blatant because I think GoFundMe were dragged in front of the Canadian, like a Canadian parliamentary committee or something, and the parliamentary committee asked GoFundMe, where's the money coming from and where's it going to? And once after that, GoFundMe, they'd previously just froze the trucker accounts, and then when they were put under pressure in that way by the Canadian Parliament, they just closed the truckers down. So this goes to show like how susceptible companies are, like in this traditional financial world. Political pressure out in public, and they'll still close you down. Like, where is freedom anymore? If that can happen.
Those Kickstarter, like a lot of those, they're all competitors with the large banks and stuff. So the government, who's owned by those people, basically, is not really going to care about the rights of them or their customers. So I mean, especially I know that I've been told by somebody who works in government and also works in crypto. Specifically, that the banks and traditional finance people hate the GoFundMe companies to begin with. So and obviously they don't like crypto either, until they get up and running and they have their own platforms out there that people are making them rich with.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary. But what do you guys think about this? Like, just that phrase in and of itself, user content that reflects or promotes behavior in support of violence. What exactly was the violence here? Like, of a protest? What's the violence?
It was threatening to the value of their property, their capital property.
Exactly. Profits lost through trade being disrupted is violence to the capitalist, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
But were there any cases of actual violence? It's a valid question, and I don't know enough about it. Were there any cases of actual violence taking place?
Did anyone starve or not get medical treatment and stuff like that? Like, are there specific cases of people dying because they didn't have what they needed, like, etc.? Other than that, I can't think of anything.
Not that I'm aware.
You hear those things a lot whenever there's a strike, to be honest. Whenever there's a strike, you'll see people on Twitter say, especially if it's transport related, oh, what about all the people who couldn't get to hospital? Well, hey, life is life. If you're going to have train drivers on strike or truck drivers on strike, things aren't going to move around. It's the laws of physics, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. The article doesn't, I don't recall, and the article doesn't identify any other, what you guys have just mentioned could be other things of violence or whatever. I think it's implicit, if not explicit, that the violence is the disruption to trade and business, essentially, in Ottawa, which is, that's crazy, So, but yeah, so they were able to shut down GoFundMe. And then there was a Christian group, called, what were they called?
Well, I think there was Give Send Go, which was
Give Send Go. That's correct.
That one shut them down. Because let us not forget, this was a Make North America Great trucker protest. So the right wing actually did a protest because they are now mad about something for once. And instead of what usually happens, leftist strikes like the ones in the against the Dakota Access Pipeline, right? The mutual aid cooperatives, they all know intimately what it's like to get the financial sanction slapped against you. This was like a very spontaneous, emergent right-wing thing. And I'm still surprised that they clapped on them so hard, but I guess it goes to show the effectiveness that they were doing.
And I think the media had a lot to do with that too, just because they threw in everybody's face so often about people protesting on highways, and everybody got all worked up and butthurt about not being able to get to work, and then they're like, oh well, you know what? Well, now we can do it since the left can hold everybody else from going to work. We can do it. And
right,
I think,
exactly.
It emboldens them. It's like a back and forth pendulum swing, before or like trying to knock over a soda machine. You got to rock it back and forth before it falls over and crashes through the wall.
You know what it all comes down to, though? It comes down to the simple fact that no one is happy with the system. Right? Even conservatives,
right and left
the last
now,
4 decades, reinforcing conservative hegemony, conservative political hegemony, unbroken Reaganism for 4 long decades. Even conservatives are deeply unhappy with that 4 decades of conservatism. So let's not be divisive about it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's unhappy. It's not about left and right. It's about us v them. It's about the people at the bottom of the pyramid against the people at the top of the pyramid who are just living the high life and
but they're still taking turns doing it their own way. We can't ignore that.
Yes, but I think there would be some debate about. I think the truckers, the protest started maybe being led by this alt-right movement or whatever, but it turned into, as we know, general dissatisfaction with a lot of different things. But here's the question: how do we?
It might be the demographic of older people too, though. But yes, that's true.
Right, but here, maybe just on this Christian point, we know there's a lot of Christians that are left wing, right, or centrist, So, I mean, Christians are just Christians, right? Their principal thing is probably do-gooderism. So they were probably seeing these truckers cold and hungry, and even if they didn't agree with the protests or how they were doing it, they were you know what Christians are like? They're like, oh Christ, send them some money for food. Like, we can't be seeing truckers go cold and hungry and all this. And especially because the Canadian government, as I recall, tried to cut out their means of heat. So, but the point I'm trying to make is here, even the Christians who wanted to give $8.5 million through do-gooderism, the Canadian government were still, nah, screw you guys, we're closing you down too. So they closed down Give, Send, Go too. So the Canadian government even shut down the Christians. So I think even the Steve points here, like, I think a lot of people will be like, what, you're not, okay, don't be mean to the guys. Like, don't let them freeze, even if you don't agree with what you're doing. Like,
Jesus didn't approve of this protest.
That wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened in America. They wouldn't have shut that the Christian.
No, you would get. Oh my gosh,
would not happen.
If they in America tried to do their own trucker protest, and I think the government was a little bit
They don't have
too
enough money.
What was that?
They don't have enough money to take off work that long.
That's true. Yeah,
our
truckers are way
debt.
more underpaid and have way higher health care debt than the Canadian ones.
Here's another. Yeah, go on, Steve.
The lot of the jobbing driver, it's not that of a Wall Street executive, right?
No, it sucks. I know that. Yes.
Massive burdens, long hours,
yes,
and a sinking cab where you have to pay attention with the slightest error you personally are on the hook for, not your employer, right? So I completely empathise with the taxi drivers or truck drivers or even train drivers or bus drivers, right? I completely
delivery drivers.
Solidarity.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on there. Could you imagine being an Amazon delivery driver? The stress that you must go through on a daily basis, knowing that just a couple of speeding tickets or a couple of late deliveries and your livelihood could be on the line.
So imagine being an Amazon delivery driver in Chicago.
Oh,
can't even.
Yeah. You're right, Steve. Like, I've spoke to a lot of truck. I'm sure we all have, like, guys who would drive a lorry, and they're like, the deadlines that they have to meet, the time, like, they don't even want to take their breaks because the risk of getting there late is you're screwed. You know, employer will come down.
Yeah, they had huge amphetamine problems in because of stuff like that back when it was big in the 80s and 90s, and you know, it was a thing because they were under all this pressure to keep going to make that money so they can spend time with their family.
It's scary. What do you think about this quote? So one of the truckers said, 3 years, like, and this just maybe shows how quickly we're moving to tyranny. He goes, 3 years ago, if you'd asked me what's the chances that Canada would freeze individual bank accounts, I'd find it really hard to believe it was 20%. And then he says, and 3 years later, it's 100%. It was not a good thing for freedom. So in 3 years, Canada went from like 20% likely to 100% closing down bank accounts for political reasons. Like, that's crazy, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty mad stuff.
Like, how quickly are we rushing to the precipice here? But let's get on to where Bitcoin stepped in here.
Well, let's think of how they can do that kind of control, and that's because of the digitalization of everything and us moving away from a cash-based society, which I think for all the things I hate about the central bank printing as much worthless pieces of paper as they do, I think there was a benefit, a freedom of the speech we could make with paper notes, with fiat currency, right? And so now that they have the powers, what is it? What happens? They exercise that power. You thought you could trust them with credit card companies. You thought you could trust them with internet payments. And look at that. They've completely lost that trust. And what are
Everyone
we building?
Sees how centralized it is now.
Mm-hmm. And collusionary and corrupted it is.
Since 2008, I'm not sure there's been any trust
Yeah,
It's
true.
it's the way the system is, and you have to interact with it to get about your daily life.
And
it's not by choice, is it?
and we
And
might
people that are
yeah.
no, people that are our age, we remember 9/11 too, and we
Yeah.
remember like what happened right after that, and then
The
we remember
Patriot
the
Act.
2008 collapse. Those two things, they ruin it. Like nobody comes back from that. Even conservatives are just like, oh please,
Right.
like they totally rejected the Bush administration and the neocons after that, but at the same time they still defaulted to them, and that's to some degree it's actually for crypto adoption, it's actually working out a little bit in our favor in America. But at the same time, they have people like, what's his name, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank,
Yeah.
consulting with them, and
Oh,
he was
God.
poo-pooing crypto like 3 years ago or something like that.
Just to keep the price down as long as he could, so he could buy more. Duh.
Yeah, and get it developed, just like JP Morgan, just like all of them.
So let's move on to like where actually crypto stepped in here to save the truckers. And Alchemist, this is maybe where I could use your expertise in understanding this. But
Yeah.
sort of broadly, like there was a thing, Tally Coin, it's called. It's like a Bitcoin-based fundraising platform.
Yep.
And it enables you to send donations straight to the Bitcoin wallet of a trucker.
Tally.
So actually, how they
yeah.
Tallycoin, yeah. And so I didn't know this. Like they would literally, the Bitcoiners would arrive on the scene and they'd give out like envelopes to the truckers in their trucks and be like, open the envelope. There's your private key or your public key or whatever. Download the wallet, type in the public key, and you'll have 10,000 satoshis in there. So here's like amongst all this I love this as well. Like Bitcoiners arrived on the scene and they had a master plan to help out truckers and walked around into the trucks, talked to them, treated them like human beings, and said, boom, open this envelope and there's like 10,000 to get you through the next few months. So I just love that. Like, isn't that just like a great tale of like the humanity of Bitcoiners and people crypto as well? Like,
And I'm sure those truckers were very thankful. Some of them, when they were able to transact those bitcoins into fiat currency, because I think that's a little bit of the sad part of this story. And crypto loves to glorify that we were able to crowdfund when we were able to, but these centralized exchanges dominate the fiat off ramps. So I think it's almost good. So some truckers, if you're savvy enough and you can use things like Bitcoin local, or local Bitcoins, right? Local.bitcoin.com. Yeah. Where you can actually just go with a person and he'll give you cash. That's one way a lot of the truckers were being able to buy things that they needed, like waters and food and gas, because that's what this capitalist system was trying to coerce them with, right? Manipulate them. Is we're going to make it impossible for you to exist and hold out for this long. And I can remember they were so glorifying how stupid all the truckers were and all this, but when you go down to brass tacks, they were very inventive and adaptive to what was happening to them. In crypto, for some, I wouldn't call this a full W in my book until you have until you have the Bitcoiners not just giving them Bitcoin, but selling them the water and transacting the Bitcoin for the food, for the gas, all those kind of things, then I become really impressed, guys.
Right.
Yeah.
What if these truckers start their own businesses now using crypto?
Exactly. I think they're incentivized now.
They had to learn how to do this. Exactly.
So these principles apply to all strikes and all protests, of course. Like people who are striking and losing money,
and people who are in mutual aid.
Oh God, a century ago, people were delivering money and food to people on strike because they were starving to death. Like the general miners' strikes in the UK, stuff like that. So this has always been an ongoing thing. I mean, like people around here, there's quite a few strikes lately. Take bottles of water. There have been ongoing strikes in the UK over the last 10 years. doctors, nurses, lawyers, barristers, teachers. I mean, it's like butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers. It's every man and his dog has been out. Every professional industry you can think of has been on strike at some point in the last 10 years. And, this stuff's still ongoing. So all of these little things that have been tested out and pioneered and stuff like the truckers' protest, they all have direct relevance going forward, don't they?
What was your question at the end, Steve? I missed it.
All of these little methods of maintaining protest, they all have direct relevance going forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely, completely. And they all add up, isn't it? Like it's just like they all add up together.
Yeah, it's going to keep snowballing.
Yeah, for sure. And you raised a good point, Alchemist. Like, because I mean, ultimately, like this, whatever efforts we put, like that were put into this, like it was only like partly successful. And the government was the Canadian government was ultimately able
the
to.
Canadian government won that protest, but the truckers definitely delivered like a pretty impressive blow. But I wouldn't call them.
It's a pretty impressive first blow, yeah. Yeah, for the first blow, it was pretty impressive, yeah. But it's how the government were able to still like track the wallet cases, or track the wallet addresses down, the relevant wallet addresses, and come at them that way. There's still and they're in this article. There's a guy that says they could have been smarter about it, and there's different technical ways they could have been smarter, which we don't necessarily need to get into. There's lessons
there. They could
have
used a little something called Tornado Cash.
The Tornado Cash, yeah, exactly.
I don't think they considered it necessary. I think going out, it was quite a reasonable assumption that the government was not going to set out to take and seize this crypto.
Have you read any history on what governments do to protesters? And, I'm obviously being facetious, but seriously, every time, I think if you're going to a protest, leave your phone at home. I think if you're going to a protest, you need to be practicing the most amount of privacy possible, because they are actively always looking to clamp down on that kind of activity. That is their favorite police power activity.
Yeah. They used to machine gun them off sending the cavalry, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Tornado Cash, and the guy who's behind that, the developer, he was arrested, right? And,
yeah. He got Julian Assange.
Somebody said on Twitter, gonna have to arrest the developers behind Swift, Visa, MasterCard, and because with my understanding, it's fraudulent transactions and money laundering occur on global financial networks. So,
I mean,
you have to arrest all those developers too. Yeah, I'm just saying. I thought that was a pretty good point, and this is all kind of and really ridiculous.
And here's the caveat. Here's the caveat to that.
DAO developers.
How much of that fraud and corruption is the intelligence and security forces of the global state sending laundered cash over to people to do all sorts of shenanigans?
Let's all remember there was a pie chart I saw. It was only 17% were illegal, like actually known illegal tagged activity. And so a majority of it is DeFi. Like you're trying to basically avoid taxes.
Yes. I think it was actually lower.
And what's the
I think
actual
it was
definition
5%.
of illegal?
I think it's a hack, right? So someone has stolen funds from somewhere, and you know that they've been stolen, and then you can see the transaction went into a Tornado Cash tumbler, but you don't see where it goes on the other side. So 17% of transactions were identified as this is hacked money from whatever. We know because we can detect those kind of things with chain analysis, right? Yeah, that's what it was.
And so let's because we're about to get onto Tornado Cash very shortly. Well, let's wait until that, and we'll dive into it even more. Just to wrap up this trucker thing, because people are probably asking Oh, so you're doing an episode on advocating Bitcoin as privacy and pro-protest, but the Canadian government shut them down, so it can't be that successful, can it? You know, I mean, that would be my question, and maybe a question of
Well, they
audience.
didn't shut down the specific hard wallets. They just shut down the ability to
Right.
use the really easy, like, layman exchanges.
Exactly.
So there's still the ability to do it, but you have to be much more tech savvy to do it.
Well, I
So
think
are
it
we-
Tech savvy, but,
exposed
like,
our
aware of how
centralized
Bitcoin works.
vulnerabilities, you know?
Yeah, the average person's
Right.
access to it, based on all of, centralization of access for the regular person, and it's all essentially education. But then you get
Yeah.
into, well, why isn't anybody educated on it? Well, it's because nobody has the friggin' time to sit there and learn all this stuff when they're out driving a truck for 40 hours at a time.
Mhm.
But with that in mind, though, are we optimistic that it might take a couple of years or whatever for this to become so mainstream and for everyone to be educated? And can we outstep the government on this then and be ahead of the game and
So,
for regular people to
I-
be ahead of the game? You
I
know?
think those guys you described that were handing out the Bitcoin in the envelopes, right? I think those are the ones that get educated, the organizer types, the union makers. They know if we can get them
Right.
to practice good privacy, we can ensure that everyone they onboard, they educate, is practicing good privacy as well, or they're
Yeah.
just doing it on behalf of them, right? I think that's what the story will be next time is, hey, we didn't just all right, it wasn't obviously enough to just give people wallets with the keys written on a piece of paper. We need to go a little bit further. I think that's what people need to start thinking about.
I agree. Okay, good stuff. Just to finish
Yeah, they
this,
know how to get stuff done too.
what'd you say, Bemke?
The organizers, clearly their work ethic is amazing. They know how to get stuff done, and they're organizers. Like, they know all the right people that need to know things. So that they should probably be one of the main targets to be educating on cryptocurrency.
Organizer
and I
DAO.
think organizer DAO, yeah, protest DAO.
Yeah.
Labor DAO.
Another
Yeah,
thing
the
that made
rest
me
of that developer is going to be bad for DAOs, in my opinion. But I mean, we'll talk about that later or some other time.
It's a dangerous precedent if it sticks. Yeah.
the last thing that made me smile about this story, and then we'll move on to the next section, is did anyone catch the name of the pro trucker Bitcoin protest? It was called Honk Honk Hodl.
Are you sure? I thought it was something like Freedom 2022 Freedom.
I think that maybe that was just the trucker protest, but the Hong Kong coddle was the Bitcoin element of it. And it kind of reminded me, Steve. You'll probably appreciate this more because you're the other guy from the islands, same islands that I'm from. Do you remember a few years ago when the public were asked to name a boat, and they called it Boaty McBoatface?
Yes, I do.
There's a certain, I don't know about you guys, but I just found that great because in the face of tyranny, Bitcoiners rolled in, and there's a sense of humor. Honk honk hodl. There's a sense of smiling and humor in the face of the fascist totalitarian state that just makes you smile as a human, doesn't it? You know. So
I'm quite sure that there was a later competition to name a train, and Trainee McTrainface won that.
Well, there was a contest to name the new Mountain Dew, and I think it was called, I forget what it was called, but or what the flavor was. But top ones, number one was
ruined your own joke there.
you missed the
Did
crucial bit
Nothing
there,
Wrong
man.
was the first one, and the second one was Gushing Granny.
Oh my god.
It gets much worse. Diabetes was on there too, but still, I thought having naming contests is the worst idea ever, unless it's a group of 20 people or something.
No, unless your judges pick the winner. That's the thing. You can't just win a vote, can it? Boaty McBoatface. True
voting.
story.
And was it the guy that set up Hong Kong Huddle? His internet name was nobody caribou. So it's like, again, it's so down to earth. You know, I'm a fucking nobody, like nobody caribou. In the face of the fascist state. Yeah.
I thought it was nobody cares about you, basically. That's what it sounded like to me. But yeah, it could be that.
Nobody caribou. And I thought I think this would be nice for the audience to hear, just to put this, because we're about putting human face on this as well, on crypto. And one of the truckers was asked about his interaction with the Bitcoiners who helped him out, right? And he said, I just met that guy a week ago, and he had a Bitcoin token. The driver explained after turning back to the camera. I said, "What's up with that?" He said, "Actually, if you don't mind." So I let him sit in the truck or whatever, and we downloaded his wallet or whatever. And he said, "There's some massive freedom-loving people who love Bitcoin and stuff like that." So he said, "We're probably going to go get some big donors in the future. So whatever." And apparently there's $8,000 of Bitcoin in there. I agree. I guarantee it's legit. That's definitely one of the craziest things that happened in the last 2 weeks. So it's like these guys were just arriving, jumping into the truck with them and going, "There's freedom-loving people. We're helping you out. There's money on its way." That's wonderful, so cool.
It's funny, as you were
sure.
telling that story, I was immediately like triggered into my Southern Christian conservative upbringing, and it sounded like he was a little evangelist, like, "Hey, would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior Bitcoin? If you just have a couple minutes of your time, I can explain how he can save you."
There's so many memes about crypto bros doing that. It's I can understand why it's annoying.
They're crypto bromans.
And then is it like you open the envelope and there's just like a shining light coming out from the envelope?
They hand you like a Bitcoin Bible of how to like transact and off ramp, on ramp, yeah.
Yeah, and they give you the first taste for free.
That's
one of these
perfect.
castles
Yeah.
was like a miniature Ark of the Covenant, weren't it? Straight out of Indiana Jones, You had to peel off the lid to this golden light spilling out.
So guys, I just moving on to the next section. We'll just go short on this one because I want to get to Bitcoin and Monero because I think that's really interesting. Like what is actually private when it comes to cryptocurrencies. But I wanted to move on to just we've talked about Wikileaks. That's freedom of speech, freedom of information, and all the rest of it. Then we went on to freedom of protests with the truckers. And then there's some other recent cases. I don't know if you guys remember these recent cases. Do you remember at the start of the Ukraine war, SWIFT stopped transacting with the Russian government, and then the US had the Ministry of Truth. Do you remember that Dolores Umbridge looking woman who just said I'm going to decide what's speech for everyone, a neoliberal who was going to be implanted in the Ministry of Truth to shut everyone down. I think the last few years have been scary in terms of censorship and cancel culture, I think. And Matt Taibbi wrote a piece on this. And I think he brings out a couple of points. I'm just going to read them out because it's it really hits home. He says, going after cash is a big jump from simply deleting speech with a much bigger chilling effect. This is especially true in the alternative media world, where money has long been notoriously tight, and the loss of a few $1,000s here or there can have a major effect on a site, a podcast, or a paper. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is we're going to talk a little bit later about Lens protocol and decentralized social media. So it's not just Wikileaks who are doing good work. This can be anyone can be thrown off a social media channel, or we could be thrown off as a podcast if we get big enough or people don't like us or whatever. Do you know what I mean? When you start going after people's money, not just taking down a post or a tweet, you actually take away their ability to get resources. That's crazy. That's scary, isn't it? It's a big escalation in censorship. Have you guys any anecdotes from your life, or have you've seen
I
anyone
mean,
get taken down?
I'm glad that Matt made that comparison, because I think it's really easy, because of how much media we consume, to equate or think that like those two things are even the same, like deleting a tweet that you made versus literally reaching into a bank account. You
Yeah,
know, whether it was a bank or the government that decided to do it, which both of those things happen. You know what I mean? It's not like it's just the government that takes your money and says, you know, F off. But you know,
yeah,
I like that he pointed that out, because I think just it's real easy to just be like, oh well, F those people. Who cares that they did that? But that is like a crazy precedent, and it is like ridiculous that it happened like because of a protest, you know? And it might say a lot more about your supply chain and how we distribute resources than it actually does about like how destructive these people may or may not have been with their protest.
Yeah, it
yeah.
exposes a lot more about the industry and how they really control things. It's like they're revealing their hand almost.
And have you guys heard of Mint Press?
Yeah, but hold on. How is that different to WikiLeaks, what we just discussed?
So, Steve, good point. Here, listen to this next quote from Mint Press, right? So, Mint Press founder and executive director Minor Adley, I think I'm pronouncing that right, correctly placing this current era of content moderation as beginning with PayPal's historic decision in 2010 to halt donations to WikiLeaks. So she's drawn the line from then what happened to WikiLeaks to now. It's just on a bigger scale. It's just happening to everyone and anyone now, like all types of. So it's not even you have to threaten the power of the U.S. government like WikiLeaks did on that scale. If they don't like your tweets, or they don't like your content, you're down, no matter how small you are. Like that's a massive escalation, you know. It's the same technique, but it's a massive escalation, you know.
Facebook's been at it for years, of course. They changed stuff, and it was quite noticeable when they did it, so that you know it stopped people viewing your content, stopped you viewing other people's content. They're still
Shadow
doing it now,
banning,
of course.
but they
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have they didn't have
Demonetizing.
control over your. They couldn't stop, so they can take you down off their platform, right? And that's bad. That's like the next step up from just taking, I don't know, like stopping you to like posting for a week or whatever.
Yeah, but
But
they
like,
don't need to. They don't need to take you off it, because they just make sure that your posts don't get seen by people. Your audience doesn't see your output.
but what's worse, Steve? I'm like these guys are Matt Taibbi and so on are making the point that we're even way beyond that now, because it moves very quickly from Facebook doing what it's doing, and then the likes of PayPal or whoever will stop you from getting money into your bank account. They'll literally, like, that's how the system moves now. Like they'll close you down if they want to cancel you, you know, where you can't even get money anymore, you know. Matt Taibbi calls the internet payments giant replete with its own founding mafia. He calls PayPal a mafia. It's
Oh, it's
crazy.
Elon Musk for you, right? But honestly, all of this, it just collapses into iTunes for me. When they did that to the humble MP3 player, and they introduced that third party to extract cash from people for accessing their own files, I knew then that we were screwed.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. It's all preventing you accessing your own resources and making you pay fees to access your own resources. It's all about controlling every little aspect of your day to day existence, day to day enjoyment of all of your
So
assets and resources, basically. Micropayments is the word for today. And all of that was about control. And it's about they control your interaction with the things that you interact with on a day to day basis. And therefore, they control you.
So what do you think about this? Because this is a part of the article that I'd never even heard this kind of point. Um, but the article was like, okay, Taibbi's against like censorship, financial censorship. But what's he for? He doesn't seem to be necessarily overly pro crypto. I mean, he's open minded to it, but the article makes the point like Taibbi and others, whilst open to crypto, might be waiting for other financial alternatives that are like slightly more acceptable, because a lot of people still see crypto as a little bit of an underbelly. And so here's my question to you guys. Like, I didn't know this, but have you heard of like Crystal Ball and Shazar and Jetty?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske are a couple now.
No, Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball.
Yeah. I know. They used to have that show on the Hill, and now they have a show called Breaking Points, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah. I do know these people. Yeah, they have a great news show.
So these guys, like, I didn't know this. Maybe you guys had heard about this, but they're so worried about censorship. Okay, but their alternative is to take their own subscription resources and just give it to their mates who are also journalists, and get their friends and close allies to do journalism for them. So that's how they kind of get around. They, instead of those kind of unknowns or less well knowns having to build up their own platform and potentially getting like banned or whatever, Crystal Ball and so forth just funnel sort of subscription money to them. So they don't. But the point is, and this guy makes it in the article, that still is not censorship resistant, because anyone can still close down your bank accounts. And if you move to
I'm sure they still have an
Substack,
LLC with a bank account that is definitely accessing fiat. Yeah.
exactly, there's still a payment link to fiat there. And also some people have moved to Substack, like Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald and stuff, but that's still like a company in the traditional financial system. They can still easily kick you off if they want. They're pro speech at the minute, but this guy makes the point that that's still not safe, and the only safe thing might be crypto here, because if you've still got a link to traditional finance, you're screwed, possibly.
Well, Substack and all those websites are also like their what is it? Their viewership is so straggly. It's like barely there, and they probably make a decent amount like per person, like as far as like making money and like generating real viewership, because people actually have to go to it instead of it being shoved in their face with an ad or whatever the hell, and we're in a feed. But like,
Yeah.
there's so many of those platforms, it seems like, or not so many, but enough to where it's like, I wish they were something like that was more concentrated. Like I used to talk about how I wish there wasn't as many jobs websites, because that would be a thing that would be good to centralize in a way. Like there are parts of it that you could decentralize that would be good, but like stuff like job websites, like why should I be uploading my resume to 10 different job websites? You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
stuff like that, and this is kind of similar, like in a way. It kind of makes it daunting.
Yeah. Do you guys think there's a Streisand effect here? Like, the more the government try to like close down crypto or freedom, protest, speech, it just like wakens people up and they move actually towards freedom or crypto more. Like, they call it the Streisand effect. It just pushes people towards the thing that the government's trying to clamp down on.
It's a demonstration
Like
of
a
its
Streisand.
anti-fragility.
Demonstration of anti-fragility. Yeah.
Steve?
Mecca Streisand.
Yeah, that was
Barbara
such a good
Streisand.
South Park episode.
What was that?
Barbara Streisand driving people to crypto. Mecca Streisand.
Do you
I don't even know.
Streisand?
That needs to be the podcast album thing, is a Mecca Streisand, but
the
like
thumbnail,
crypto.
yeah.
Yeah.
Alex will get, if you've never seen it before, Alex, you'll enjoy that.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
It's from South Park.
Just type it into YouTube. Mecca Streisand.
Mecca Streisand. Okay.
Barbara.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that straight after the pod. I'll get on that. But what do you guys think? Like, just to wrap up this section, like, why is freedom of speech and assembly so important? Like, I mean, and when you see like some leftists, for example, like who would say like, screw those truckers, or who cares if so and so's demonetized? We don't like their politics anyway. Like, what do you think? Isn't that's obviously a slippery slope? Like, we know the government always comes after the left eventually. If you're on
First,
the left, or yeah, first and most
primarily.
intense. But even if they're not coming after them now, they will. So there's no hiding. But so it's a slippery slope to throw your political opponents under the bus in this way, right? Nobody's got any thoughts.
I keep coming back to the fact that there are some things that you just cannot allow, right? And there has to be some mechanism in place to prevent those things that cannot be allowed. But you're right, whatever that mechanism is, it will extend to extreme definitions of what must not be allowed by the Nazis. Rounded up socialists and put them in concentration camps because socialism must not be allowed in Nazi Germany, right? So once you have a mechanism in place, it depends how far the powers that be want to take it, doesn't it? It's their, it becomes their choice and fully in their power.
Yeah, it's all about giving them power. Like, it's okay if communities, decentralized communities, want to decide, what's allowed or who interacts with their community, but that's democratic choice. But when you're giving it to the state and they're just deciding themselves, often with elite interests at heart, it's not good for any of us, right?
See, arguably that should be democratic choice how the state interacts, but really it's just some behind the scenes geezers making decisions in alphabet soup agencies.
Yeah, and they've got their interests, right? Their class interests and whatever else. It's not ever in our interests anyway. But we should be very careful about these losses of slippery slopes, I guess.
Yeah, I would say to counter that is we got to move fast and break things first, because we know the freedom of our speech. There's these overlapping concentric circles, right, of what they don't want to have happen and what we don't want to have happen. And I think having your governance decentralized, democratic, liquid, digital, all these things that are made possible with blockchain tech is better than trying to work and reform the system to accept those things. I think you emerge underthrowing or overthrowing the system with these governance mechanisms, and you don't ask for permission to do that. So I think that's where the freedom is so uncensorable, permissionless, and we should take advantage of those while we can, until once then the revolution happens, right? Once we've got the control, once we're the relevant powers, then I think what Steve's talking about, the things we don't want to have happen, then we can go back and kind of patch things together. But I would say for the time being, let the dark markets reign. Let those things go, and let's learn from their failures, because ultimately all this tech is super, super early on. I don't think Bitcoin's going to last until the very end of time. I don't think even Ethereum can be the one. It's going to be so many added technologies that emerge over time if we put in the right collectivized efforts,
So that's a nice segue, to the conversation we were having earlier. So let's get back into it. How can tools such as Bitcoin, or even better, Monero and Tornado Cash, going back to the question Steve had at the start of what should we prevent? Is it just better to use all these tools to bring to because it's going to be disruptive to elite power centers right now, and to sort of squabble over, okay, there could be an opportunity for money laundering or for this, that, or the other we don't like. That's inevitable anyway. We can't stop that. We just have to go quick, crash, burn, bang, boom, break away, and it's going to be messy and bumpy, but that's the only way we get out of this. Or else they'll start to use it against us and say, oh, ban this, ban that, taking key tools, key weapons away.
It gets co-opted. It's all recuperated.
Right. You can already see the signs with this Tornado Cash of, how quickly like the stable coins have moved away from it, and people are scared shitless. And there's all this talk about decentralized power, and as soon as the FBI and the DOJ steps in and says don't touch Tornado Cash or any Ethereum account connected to it, everyone's like, okay,
Yep, they had all those
whatever
wallet
you.
addresses censored. That was
Yeah.
wild. I mean, that goes back to the
Wild, isn't it?
financial instruments that PayPal mafia uses. We're seeing the new crypto mafia emerge,
The new crypto mafia, yeah, right, yeah. It really was a chilling effect, wasn't it? Like, oh my God. And what's to stop them doing this from other, like, could they ban? Let's talk a little bit about Monero then, like Alchemist. What do you see as like the key privacy differences between Bitcoin and Monero?
The ledger is completely private. You do not see any addresses, you do not see any amounts. And so, by virtue of that, with all their zero knowledge proofs, their stealth addresses, ring signatures, ring CT, right? There is no chain analysis. There's only communications between two wallets, and that is something, frankly, that Bitcoin should have implemented in an update or in a hard fork. I don't know why they didn't do that. I think that's probably because block science has been co-opted by venture capitalist money, and they see that store of value means, oh, you need to look more like gold, and gold means you can see it anywhere it is and anywhere it goes. That doesn't make sense, but it did to them somehow. But no, Monero is an update, an improvement on cryptocurrency technology. I think there's other examples like a secret network. So if you can think of Monero is the private version of Bitcoin, then secret is the private version of Ethereum. And then you have like Oasis Network is the stealth version of Cosmos. So crypto already has all these emergent effects that when we all kind of recognize, and this is why I identify with crypto, even though I don't practice with crypto all the time. I'm not paying my bills in Bitcoin. I'm not doing those things because that's not what I'm interested in. I think this ethos and this experimentation and all these iterations, I can see the future emerging, and it's potentially glorious, but it's also horrifically dangerous and dystopic potentially, right? If we go the CBDC route, right?
Yeah. If we go the which route?
The CBDC, the centralized
CBDC,
bank digital currency.
Yeah. Yeah. It
But on
is.
the other hand, from what you just explained about how private these stealth these coins are, I mean, in the early days, I remember hearing economists raving about the fact that it was a public ledger. We've discussed this recently on our pod, talking about the fact that it is a transparent, open, publicly accessible ledger, right? Now, if you're getting rid of that, what you have is it's still decentralized, but sure, that brings up questions. It's much more likely to be able to falsify records if nobody can successfully verify it. Wherever the hashes might change, I get all that stuff. But the reality is, it can't be seen by a person to be validated by a person. That's got to have questions attached for some people, And then there's the other question that, do we really want technology to exist whereby somebody in one country could buy people in another?
I didn't quite catch the first question, but I think I don't know if anybody else did and has an answer to that. But maybe the broader question is there, what are the downsides to a coin like Monero? Like, I mean, what would Bitcoiners say about Monero? Like, why haven't? Because there's this big competition, isn't it? Bitcoiners like to say like they're sufficiently private and they're anti-state, but yet there's a coin that's potentially more private. So what's the cons here of Monero, if there is any? Like, do you see any, Alchemist?
So I'm not pro Austrian hard money economics. So that's one thing personally I have against a currency like Monero. And I think things like electronic cash should exist, right? If they exist in the real world, right, you're gonna have humans being sold to other humans, whether it's on tour and they're just mail ordering the cash, right? Or whatever. I don't think there's any preventative measures economically really that we can do to ensure all human behavior gets stopped. I think when you build those
Right.
kind of mechanisms, they get used more to affect the mutual aid workers, the cooperativists, the guerrilla fighters that are trying to fight for revolution in their countries, right? All of those people get lumped into that censorship. And so I think holding steady to uncensorability, to just trusting the individual for now is the way to go forward. I don't think you end up proliferating the amount of human slavery that already exists, because it exists with US dollars and it will exist with Monero dollars, right? I think
Yeah.
what is potentially, I think you have much more potential to fight against the Monero dollar transactions, right? And there's a lot of good experimentation to be done on that front. But I think changing and saying that, oh, we don't need private transactions, well, then you need to tell me why a guerrilla revolutionary force isn't necessary, why mutual aid to help homeless people and feed them when the police powers always take down your food camps, your clothing distribution stuff. If they're going to do those things, we need to be able to make sure they can't fight us in doing the good things, because it's more
Isn't
important to do the
exactly-
right stuff
exactly
than
the
it is to
conversation
prevent the
we had
wrong.
before, isn't it? It's exactly the point that when you decide something isn't acceptable, the people who define that have the power, don't they?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. But
right.
who's deciding it? What else will they decide on?
I
if
think
they're
it's
given
once
the power?
we're the deciders, right? Then we can go back to that Steve question and think more deeply about it. But while the decision making is held in a centralized collusionary few, we need to be taking all precautions necessary to protect ourselves from them, and that includes implementing privacy protections like Monero's.
And the great irony about the truckers having all that cash seized is that they were the people transporting those Wayfair packages, weren't they? That's a QAnon joke. I don't know if you got that.
I was about to say, oh, you believe that Wayfair story, huh?
I'm not saying I believe it, just saying I'm
Yeah.
aware of it.
No, yeah, I remember.
I don't know what that. You guys are a lot more
What
online
I'm
than I
saying
am.
is, some of those truckers did believe in that.
Oh, there were
I don't
so
know
many
what the-
QAnon truckers on that. And I mean, leave it to the media
sure.
to focus and make that the focal point. So who knows if that was the majority of the movement, right? But definitely my impression was.
But that's
Yeah, but the average person believes crazy crap that doesn't really make any sense too. So like, I mean,
Oh, no doubt.
it makes sense that the average person there would have like would believe weird things they saw on Facebook, regardless of whether they identify as like following QAnon.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely believe some very fringe things. There's no two ways about it. I'm sure you will do too.
Hey, I believe Epstein didn't kill
Yeah.
himself, so call me QAnon, all right?
You don't believe who
Because
killed
that's
himself?
not even
Never died
QAnon.
on the loop, but instead came over to the United Kingdom and took a job in a chippy in Wigan. And I believe Marilyn Monroe did too.
No, Epstein was dating some girl named Courtney Love. That's what
Oh
happened.
yeah. Oh yeah. Dude, oh man, the connection with
there's
Kurt
there's
Cobain
enough- there's
blew
enough
my
dog-
mind. Oh.
There's enough dodgy stuff out there that's true that doesn't even need to be called conspiracy. It's just true, you know. But let me ask this: what is the next thing to be closed down? Like after Tornado Cash, like where does it end, right? If they can take down Tornado Cash, that's so integrated into the Ethereum community and all the rest of it. Can they, like, what's to stop them, like, taking down something else? Like, could they take down Ethereum, Aave? Could they take down
It would be like a
Monero?
Uniswap or something like that.
A Uniswap? Because, like, what's to stop them saying, like, we're taking down Aave or Uniswap because it's traded some stuff that interacted with Tornado Cash? Like, where does this end? You know, like,
So
if
I think
if they've done it this quick, yeah.
No. You can go.
No, that's the question. It's just like they've moved so easy on this. It's such had a chilling effect. So, like, what's the next thing? And
So
you know,
because
are
these
we
guys
worried
aren't organized on chain, purely on chain, right? They have LLCs, they have corporation bank accounts, right? They don't exist purely on the blockchain. I think that's what something like an anonymous founder like Satoshi, who doesn't exist, he's just a member of the ether realm, right? I think once you can figure out, like what I was saying with the truckers, next time it would be best if they could transact directly their Bitcoin for the things they needed. I think for corporations to be able to do everything they need to with no interaction with the state, with their regular infrastructure, that's when we really are going to see some exponential growth and some crazy tests, right? I think people are hesitant now to put real effort, but it's going to be one of these first network states, network societies that really gets the ball rolling.
I see. So the system has to change in a big way almost to defeat this. Okay. So
Well, the
let's
system
move
doesn't
on.
have to change. We have to adopt a holistic type system, right? So we have to have our own adjudication. We have to have our own employment benefits. We have to have our own, all that infrastructure, right, to sufficiently make an economy for your own society, for your own state, right, to exist entirely digitally. It's possible. It is conceivably possible, and it's a matter of faith and effort on people's part to take the leap and just start doing it now.
Well, that's what we've said throughout this pod, isn't it? Like we've said, and Steve has put the fear of God into people a few times. Like, we need to get going and start building this because the establishment and elites and whatever else, like, will do it before us because they've always a step ahead and they've ways and means of crushing us and taking things from us. So we need to get at it. And so it brings us on into a nice little segue into the final section. Like, decentralized social media will be one of those things that we need to build out for our community, society, or whatever. And so that's happening. Like, Lens Protocol is one of the ones that are getting people excited at the minute. Yeah, really interesting stuff. I think the next generation of social media will be all about creators. Us, if we post, we own that data. So it's not like it's not Facebook that owns it and can sell it and can give it to the CIA or whoever. You know, like that's what Web3 brings to social media, isn't it? Like, we'll own it. We'll, as a community, govern it as well, so we can develop it in our own interest. I think that's fascinating. You know, it's just wonderful. What do you guys think?
I think Lens Protocol, from what little I've heard of it, is very exciting stuff, but I'd like to hear a lot more if someone knows more than me.
Yeah, I think
Does anybody else? Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's got it's the composability is really unique for a Web3 application. I like that it's not you have to go to this one Lens Protocol site. It's anyone is welcome to build their own social media app on top of the Lens Protocol. So you get to take your profile, your identity, right? So all that clout that you've been building on Facebook, all of those tweets you've been making on Twitter, you can actually migrate and take that data with you to another social media, or it can follow you, and it's also your choice what follows you and what gets attached to your identity. Whereas with a Facebook, with an Instagram, a Twitter, that's all under their jurisdiction. That's under their control. What your interests are, what your identity is all determined by them. This social media, this Web3 is giving us that autonomous ownership, right? Where we have the sovereignty to make those decisions and optimize, right, our profiles for everyone to see authentically and transparently.
That's such a good point. It's not just about the ownership, but it's how we can move it around to whatever community online that we want. That's
and
such a
that's
good
like
point.
part of ownership, you know, the freedom to exit. I think Balaji talks about that, right? So that's part of autonomy, is you being able to take something with you and bring it somewhere else, right? And
Right.
And I think that does something better for censorship in my mind, where I don't like the shock and awe type mentality that a lot of people have, that Alex Jones needs to be completely wiped off of the face of the internet. Okay, yes, you cannot like Alex Jones on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, right? But when you go after his bank accounts, when you go after him in AWS and you say, no, you are not allowed the freedom to speak in the digital realm, that's where I have a really big issue. And I say, no, just put them over in the dark corner over there. Put them over with their friends over there where we can observe them and make sure they're not getting too wild and crazy. And also we know who to evangelize, who to go after and give good education and information. It's like, oh, so you're the ignorant ones. Why don't I show you the way? That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that as well, but I think, like, just to make it clear for our audience, like, who wanted clearly put what's so good about decentralized social media compared to centralized social media, and there's like 3 points. I'll just read them out here. I thought they were so good, so clear. It's like, problems with centralized social media. First, the company that controls the central service can censor content or delete accounts at will. Second, these centralized services are siloed, meaning that the data is not accessible to other applications and add-ons that might want to integrate with that central application. Kind of what you said, Alchemist, the autonomy there of developing, us going elsewhere. And finally, these services are subject to single points of failure. If the server goes down, the service is unavailable. Not good also, right? That what if there's a protest in, I don't know, Tunisia against the government there? Oh, suddenly Facebook goes offline, you know?
Yeah,
So
and we saw with Arab Spring, they had a switch to just turn off everyone's internet, and they had no way. Yep.
That's used. Yeah, that's used
Hong
everywhere.
Kong too.
Or they can turn it up, can't they? Certain voices they turn up, certain voices they close down, depending on their political agenda. That's underrated as a threat. But yeah, coming back to the Alex Jones point, like, yeah, it's like you're not in a digital world or not in the real world that you're going to be able to ban this guy or people you don't like. They're always going to find an outlet, and if it's just a democratic choice. And for me, it's just, if you don't like him, don't switch on to him, right? Or like, stand up. It's part of being democratic to stand up and just say, like, you know, we don't like your point of view. It just seems quite immature and childish and not working anyway, even making the whole thing worse by trying to really, like, crush these people into the ground. It just doesn't work, and it makes it worse. So, like, yeah, I mean, in the decentralized social media world with Lens Protocol, where, as you say, Alchemist, it's not just one social media platform, it's many different ones that interact. It's a social graph. Then Alex Jones will find his community, right? And people will follow him. The only thing we can hope for, or maybe even institute, is that they can do whatever they want in their community, but as long as it doesn't direct harm to other communities or whatever. But that'll be a democratic choice as well for the communities to decide on. What do you guys think? Tom, you've been quite quiet. What do you think? Steve?
I just want to say that my bank account has been seized by the government.
They're charging me $1.2 million because I said something about Sandy Hook and the judge being a demon.
Had to loan me some money.
That's a pretty good
Here's the thing. It's all about cancel culture, isn't it, this? And, I'm sure we could ask 100 different people what that term means, and we'd all come up with 100 different answers. But here's the thing. For me, all of this stuff traces back to Mary Whitehouse waging her own little personal crusade against the BBC in the 1960s as a conservative woman. And, it's still going on today. She was trying to shut down people and shows and stuff. Like there's right-wing protests in the UK right now because some travelling drag queens have a thing where they read stories to kids. Right now, I'm not going to take my kids to it, yeah, but I have no issue with the fact that pantomime dames basically are reading children stories. I'd go along and see it, and I'm sure it wouldn't be as appalling as they're making out. Because if it was, they wouldn't be hosting it in town halls, right? But you have right-wingers, and they are right-wing organisations going absolutely up in arms about the corrupting children. This is the same thing that has been going on for over half a century, and that is the heart of cancel culture. It's part and parcel of neoliberalism. It's part and parcel of our conservative status quo, and it always has been since before Reagan and Thatcher changed their hegemony. This has been part and parcel of it. So it's always going to happen. Speaking of the 60s, was it Bertrand Russell who was propositioned into a public debate by Oswald Mosley? And he said, no, there's no way I'm doing it. He wrote him a letter. I'm sure you can look it up. And this is from memory. But basically, Bertrand Russell, the moral philosopher, wrote a letter to Oswald Mosley. If you don't know who he is, he was the leader of the English fascists. He was trying to make it a genuine political party and a going concern in English fascism. And Bertrand Russell wrote him a letter. He said, look, you've written me all these letters, and I'm not even engaging with your points. The bottom line is, I have devoted my entire life with heartfelt passion to opposing all of the vile things you stand for. There can be no good come out of you and I meeting and having a discussion. No good can come of it, right? It's basically what he said. Is that no platforming, or is that just common sense? Why would I want to sit there and engage with people who I know are completely opposed to everything I consider right and good? Yeah, this is Bertrand Russell's point. And that was in the 60s, so this has been going on for a long bloody time. And it isn't going away, and it isn't even getting bigger. It's just we have more ways now of disseminating this stuff than Mary Whitehouse did when she was writing letters to the papers, open letters to the BBC. Do you know what I mean?
So, just so I understand your point, Steve, are you saying that there should be almost a freedom to, and if we transpose it into this decentralized blockchain social media space, you'd like to see a world where there's a freedom of people to engage if they want, but also freedom to not engage if they want? Is that what you're saying?
Isolate, I guess.
Exactly, right. Yeah. Because Bertrand Russell can say, look, I want nothing to do with you. That's a valid position, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a freedom, and that's an autonomous choice as well, right? So I think there's the freedom to exist in your own echo chamber, right? Because that's what you are essentially creating when you say, I don't want to engage at all. But
hold on, no. That is not true. Bertrand Russell certainly knew what fascism was.
No. Not saying, I'm saying you can create, and I'm not saying you will, right? I'm not saying it makes it impossible for you to engage with fascism, right? I'm saying you can create a chamber, a safe circle on your social graph, right? We're trying to transpose this to Lens protocol terms. So you can basically build your community and keep out what you're describing, the fascists. I don't want to interact. I don't want them interacting and poisoning the well of my community, et cetera, et cetera. So I think like a good example is if I was a parent, I wouldn't want Andrew Tate TikToks to be sent to my child. I would like the freedom or somehow the automation to make that autonomous decision for my kids, for that I don't want them exposed to this garbage because I know how infectious
I don't know who that guy is. So
dang it.
Yeah. Steve, just ask a clear question. Are you just explicitly restate like the point you're making? Was it what I said, that you have the freedom on these send lens protocol for like for fascists or people with views you don't even want to engage with, like your Bertrand Russell anecdote? You should have the freedom on decentralized platforms to go, nope, we don't want you in the platform. But you are also saying they should, if they choose, go and form a community if they want? Or are you saying they should not be allowed to form a community? Like, I mean, that's what
These are questions I haven't considered until we're having this conversation, to be honest with you.
No, I'm just trying to pull the thread.
What we're really talking about is a tough and nebulous subject that we often refer to as cancel culture, and settling that in a 5-minute chat is going to be a difficult prospect, isn't it? I don't know what the answers are, but there has to be, a variety of options. Is all I can see right now. I'm not.
Somebody cut me off here if I'm getting this wrong, but isn't the simple solution to these questions that we're asking just democracy? Like, we've said it before and again, like, you have a platform here with Lens Protocol potentially where anyone and everyone can go to the communities or not be in communities as the communities decide in a democratic way. So you're just saying it all comes down to just choice instead of what we have now where it comes down from above. There is no cancel culture because it's not a culture, it's only a community choice, and it'll differ between 1,000 different, 1,000,000 different communities on Lens Protocol. You're allowed in here, you're not allowed in there, we like you, not you. Okay, you're coming in, but under these conditions, and if you break it, you're out, blah, blah, blah. It's just, once you decentralize the whole damn thing, it's up to people. And yeah, there'll be bumpy ways along the road. Some communities might decide to let Andrew Tate in or Alex Jones under the precondition that he meets their standards. And then if he breaks them, you're out. And you can do that with all these different blockchain mechanisms. Just out.
Yeah, but you can do that with Twitter.
No, Twitter does that for Twitter.
No, Twitter does that. Yeah, not the community. So that's the difference here, I would say.
They hire the moderators.
Facebook group.
It's organized properly, actually. Like, you can do it with Twitter, because if you threaten, like, they make decisions all based on marketing data, like, for their bottom line and their numbers. So if they think that, like, and the most extrapolated from that they even get is doing it overall for, like, all the corporations that are all affiliated with them and whatnot. But still, like, they're talking about, like, they're always thinking about money. So ultimately, if you affect their pocket somehow, like, for instance, like, there's so much social pressure on not saying certain words, like, that's all social pressure that affects their bottom line if they, like, allow it. So their decisions are, for the most part, on all these corporations, are all based on what the bottom line is.
Yeah, but I think it's mob rule in a sense. Like, all it takes is maybe 1,000 strong voices. Is that reflective of Twitter's community? I don't know. We had this conversation the other day, Alchemist, didn't we? Maybe we should just bring it up here. Like,
yeah, we can. 1,000 strong voices have like 1 million followers that listen to those voices.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just kind of believe.
I don't know if you can equate Facebook and Twitter and all them as democratic processes for canceling people.
I'm not at all.
Definitely
but I
not.
am saying that like, there is some form of like, consensus dynamic happening. Like, and that's why whenever someone says cancel culture, I'm always just like, well, we used to call it voting with your dollar, because nobody's going to cancel someone unless it's going to cost them money overall.
Right, but there's who has the most dollars that gets to cancel the most, right? There's who has the most data driving through their platform that gets to make it. I think what we're saying with Lens Protocol is that decision gets distributed. It gets decentralized to the finer point of actually being within more autonomous control of its users. It's not Lens that is booting people out. It's the Lens users that are booting them out. That's a different thing than Twitter.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of things good with that, because it can lead to, like, more informed discussion, better standards, more nuances and standards, better protocols. Like it just democratic debate on these key issues down to like a lower level and a thicker discussion, a better discussion makes there's just so many good things that come out of that anyway. And like at the end of the day, like what we discussed the other day, Alchemist, was like, if you extrapolate this out from Lens Protocol and social media into say network societies, like we don't I don't think we can live in a world, and we shouldn't strive for it at this stage, where we try and not allow some people who have toxic views or politics that we don't like necessarily or that's distasteful to not live. Like that's giving up on the human being completely, like, which I don't think anyone wants. Like, we're about like trying to change people's minds and bring them over to pro-social and ideas that we believe in,
Consensually,
right?
not coercively,
And not coercively, right? And but I think that the thing that we came down to, which we agreed on as like a key phrase, is democracy is going to be messy. There's going to be communities in real life and on the blockchain digitally that will be, like not great,
The
but they just
4chan
have
network
to.
state.
4chan networks and the white supremacist communities or whatever it is, or alt-right communities, or however whatever it is, the whole panoply of people's views, that democracy just has to work. And there's like a bit of a competition on the blockchain, like sort of market competition between communities, like of ideas, I think. And we kind of agreed, didn't we? Like we kind of settled on democracy is a good thing. Let that process, however bumpy it is, play out. And in the long term, the majority of humanity, we believe, would be like not with these toxic views, if you like, right? And democracy kind of plays that part.
By and large,
By
I'm
and large,
inclined to agree with you, but let's not forget that Hitler and Mussolini won elections.
Totally. But those are also
right.
representative Republican elections. I think when you have a more active participant governance project, you and these are things and tools that we're going to have to anticipate. What happens when a Hitler or Mussolini rises to power, and I think when my response always is that if that's what your democracy voted for, if those are the people that you've chosen to lead you, then that's just the society you deserve, right? The Hitler or the Mussolini is gonna happen, whether it's the capitalist bourgeoisie voting them in or whether it's the uneducated, ignorant proletariat, right? I think the answer is educate and empower the people to not vote those guys, to know from a structuralist, materialist analysis who you need to be really looking for, right, in candidates. But I don't even think this style of governance is going to be practiced for much longer. I think a more Chilean cybernetic project is the scariest thing on CIA's watch list. They're waiting for someone to suggest this and to actually be implementing it. That's the kind of governance that I picture.
Everything you just said, I completely agree with. And the bottom line is, it's all about getting that education that we're being denied under the current system. It's been eye-opening for a lot of us, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, over the last few years. It has seemed like we're heading towards that dystopia for one reason or another. The reality is we've had one system of government for over 40 years across the whole Western world.
Absolutely.
Call it whatever flavour you want. That is the undeniable reality of it. Slim Overton window, two parties who are just managing it, right? That has been it since Reagan and Thatcher. But all of the vista of conversations within that window, all of the massive changes that we've seen, like Brexit or be it Trump or Biden, somebody who opposes them has a real great grievance, right? And the sheer polarity and how it affects people's lives. The fact that we're predicted for energy bills exceeding like average wage. Do you know what I mean? It's like in the UK in 2023. It is insane the situation we're in, where household bills are going to outstrip household income. Right?
Yep. Got to choose heating
It
or
is an
eating.
absolute. It is an absolutely insane situation we've found ourselves in. Just within this window of politics, within the last 4 decades, how much things have changed for the worse for the working people. And we're borderline at one of those crunch points as it is. It's been scary for everybody, hasn't it? Seeing the whole sweeping changes that we've had without really changing anything.
But
The idea
here's the question I have, which maybe brings us all together into like one question and back to blockchain. Like, is the difference between what Steve said, what we've had for the last decades, God knows how long, even before that, our governance, our democracy has been top down, and like always with the same class interests, right? And somebody else said this to me the other day, which I agree on. I've said the same. Is blockchain, is crypto, um, a method, a way, a path for the people at the bottom, whatever you want to call it, the working class, whatever it is, to seize the means of production, is how they put it, the means by which they can create their own social media, create governance of this or that. And so the point is, I'm trying to make here, could we be on the cusp of technological means wherein decisions from the bottom up are made, in their interests in whatever way, so we won't get this constant crisis, and there will, when people take charge of their lives, educate themselves with themselves in a community, you're less likely to get Hitler figures coming up from that, but only because they're taking charge and they're educating themselves, and because they're taking, but more importantly, because they will be taking decisions in their own best interests, materially, economically, whatever. And out of such good conditions that Hitler arises, I don't think so. So I'm less like, I in this blockchain world, and if it goes the right way and it is bottom up and all the rest of it, I just don't see the dynamics over time that there's there's a big risk of like a one figure coming out of the rot and having answers for everyone. Everyone's already taking charge and manifesting their own reality, and you'd think in their own best interests because they're in charge. It's really only these Hitler fascist figures and all the rest of it come out of just like bad situations, like, so I don't know, maybe I'm being naive with that, and maybe there always will be communities with just such toxic ideas, and even if they are, socially wealthy and all the rest of it taking charge, they'll still want a Hitler figure to lead them, like a daddy, and then bundle into all their digital communities to wreck them. And then maybe that's when we have to go in the digital, that blockchain realm. Now like we're digitally cutting you guys the fuck off. But I just don't see it as much of a risk. Maybe I'm being naive. What do you guys think? Like I
I
just don't
think
see it.
those mechanisms of control that allowed the Mussolinis and the Hitlers to rise, it was because of their capital, right? It wasn't necessarily their politics or their charisma. They had those things, but I think the more relevant thing was who were they colluding with? What were the centralized control mechanisms, like the media propaganda complex, like how good they are at organizing? I think when you decentralize and distribute those mechanisms that all the politicians that are getting voted for in our network society, when it's happening in that manner, Mussolini is not even relevant on everyone's social graph because he has so many bad conspiratorial beliefs and blah blah blah. He just doesn't align or match up with that many people. He won't be heard.
Yeah, and you would think that there's much more ways in the digital space to, even if such a figure was to start to build momentum or something, I don't know, like, in the digital space, there'd be ways to just cut that off. And so it doesn't infect everybody else, like as easy as it is in real life, because there's more mechanisms of control in a network society on blockchain. Millions of network societies around the world, and one of them, there's a Mussolini figure coming out of it. Just seems, and the rest of them are like, yeah, nah. And we talked about this the other day, alchemists, didn't we? Like, what are the crypto economic means of shutting down trade or like interaction with such a community? Could you like, use some sort of crypto methods to like fuck their code, or bounty off their leaders? Like, there's all
The
sorts of
crypto
ways you could
ninjas.
crush that community if need be. What?
I said the crypto ninjas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All for the leaders of the fascist blockchain network society, some expensive NFT bored apes to get them to stop their fascism. Who knows?
Price go up on their heads.
Yeah. Assassination coin.
Yep. Assassin coin.
Assassin coin. Yeah, buy into the coin, and Mussolini's more likely to get killed.
Buy this coin, and the bounty keeps going up. It's more valuable to kill him. Oh man. No, I think there's what's cool is crypto has come up with a lot of non-violent, uncoercive means of, defending itself, and mainly our mode of or our thinking of who we defend against is obviously the state, is obviously centralized finance and banking, but all those methodologies that they use to censor and control us, we can flip those mechanisms around and make the protocol democratic and distributed, all those beautiful, wonderful things, right? And that you can imagine the 4chan network state, it gets sanctioned just like Russia would be by the United States. So where my hope is that there's not a network state the size and power as the U.S. hegemonic empire is. My hope is in the future, there's just a proliferation, exponential. I think there's 197 countries, right, that are relatively big, something like that. I hope that would be 10x for network states and societies, so that when a Hitler, when a Mussolini arises to power, well, they're only controlling and influencing like 1,000 to 100,000 people. That would, for me, would be a huge win for society if we didn't have, because it's because of the centralization of our military industrial complexes, our hyper financialized complexes, right? All those things are just too lucrative and juicy to take over. We need to come up with a system, and yes, we can have general alliances, and there can be big groups of network societies that all act very aligned, and then they will all agree with each other. How do we go about punishing and disincentivizing the 4chan state over there? Well, let's not do any economy with them. That's step one. Let's not contribute any of our computer power, right? Because you can imagine the Ethereum is a world computer, so we don't want 4chan using the Ethereum computer, something like that, because we can block their wallet addresses. You can keep going down the line.
Exactly. There's just like a million ways like that could be disrupted, and I don't think any of us would say like. I mean, once you start getting into all the different network societies, deciding which network societies are toxic or bad, that's a bad state of affairs as well. I'd see that. It's not ideal. On the digital. We should. I think we said this the other day as well. There should be a hands-off approach to, say, you keep using the 4chan community as an example. I'll keep using that. Let them do whatever they want inside their community. It's when it starts leaking out, or they're trying when it starts becoming a problem for all other communities, that's when we should be going, nah. But I think if there's like digital communities wherein they're happy with themselves, and like they've decided to like not like abortion or something like this, it's like, well, that's up to them kind of thing. Like, it's not affecting people who, in a really sort of coercive way, who don't want it. If it does, okay, then maybe there's discussions to be had. But I just feel uncomfortable with, in the digital space, us going down the route of like this liberal, what we have now, of like societies just saying like, oh, this country's bad, this bad because of this. It just leads to a dark place.
Policing and intervening.
Exactly. exactly,
I
and
would say
it'll happen in the digital space as well.
I would say
Yeah.
you can tokenize and publish on the blockchain, right, your human rights, your Nuremberg code, right, all that kind of stuff. I think there is a place for something like that. I think we need to innovate and iterate on better things than that. But when 4chan state is, breeding and selling for PDF files, and they're just doing that willy-nilly, and well, the neoliberal in me wants to go save some children, right? I think there's some level that humanity agrees on things in a majority sense, and that we can come up with these more democrat. It's, for me, it's all about the means. We have things that we're already doing now. The problem is the means that we do them are undemocratic, are untransparent and unaccountable. When we practice those things with blockchain governance tech and we make them correct, right? We're not centralizing things. We're not making a CBDC type system where it's only us who can read the code and it's only we who can read the chain for ourselves. No, you got to open those things up. You got to make yourselves composable, because I think there's necessary experimentation by other people who have better ideas than you, that need to be able to iterate. All those kind of principles and ethos in crypto, I hope, will be the winning emergent factor in creating these states or societies.
Let's finish on this, because we could go on forever on this, but it's just popped into my head. It's a question maybe for Steve, principally, because he's the sci-fi nerd, but I think you all probably are. But isn't it like Star Wars or Star Trek, or one of those two, where they had like kind of post-imperialism, so like let the world be, we don't really want to intervene. It was a Star Trek where it was like we don't
Yes.
intervene in worlds unless it's like something serious.
Star Trek's actually
Yeah.
one of the only sci-fi universes that isn't dystopian. And if somebody can correct me, I think it's, out of all of the mainstream ones, it is the only one that is like optimistic. And yeah, like you said, post-imperialist, and there's no, like, money doesn't even exist on Earth in Star Trek, at least in the Next Generation. And
Yes.
the concept of money is like kind of frowned upon, because it's like we already have everything that we need. We have all the energy we need. We have all the resources. Like, what do we need money for? Money's because at that point it just becomes numbers in a box that tell you where resources should go, and nobody needs to hoard it.
Yeah, I think
So
there's something to be said about like resource based, that you can still tokenize stuff in crypto. So even though there might be no money, no profit incentive being exchanged between resources, there's still an accounting necessary, right? We still have a supply chain, that kind of stuff. And I think crypto could eventually evolve into doing something like you're describing with them.
yeah, it's like the ultimate central, like, as I hate to use the word, but central planning tool when it comes to that, like, land usage and agriculture and just like general
Decentral
resources.
planning
Yes,
tool.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like VeChain, I think, is doing. Unfortunately, it's being worked on by some of the largest like tax and supply chain organizations. And like, there's what is this? I forget what the name of the tax company is, but it's like the largest in the world, and it deals with all the Fortune 500 companies, and they're building on VeChain as a supply crypto.
And they're just doing the hard work before we hard fork them.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Something similar to that, yeah. Can't wait. I love it.
Steve, what do you think? Do you have any last sci-fi related, Star Trek related points?
The thing that made Star Trek what it was they had two simple things that made a completely different world, and that was one, the transporter technology. Once you've got something that can scan something rearrange its molecules and give you whatever you want, right? Like a magic box or a magic wand, then you could get a spade of earth, throw it in a box, turn it into gold, or it's the alchemist's stone plus 10,
Alchemist, you
you
said?
know. The philosopher's stone by 10. You could turn that soil into medicine or water or food or gold or enriched uranium, anything that you need, literally, just rearranging the molecules of mass. Yeah.
Right. And they do
And
use
the other
nuclear
thing they
energy,
need
but it's safe and
is
decent.
energy. It's
Yeah.
abundant energy. That's exactly right. So a starship like the Enterprise has it's dilithium. Is it dilithium? Whatever fictional magic crystal generator it's got, which
Yeah,
provides such
fictional
abundant
nuclear
energy.
energy.
They can provide this fictional transporter technology and the replicators all over the ship in abundance. And the story is that it's all over the world. You know, like anyone, anywhere can get anything they need. There is such abundant energy to power these machines. It literally costs nothing. Yeah. And if everything you could ever want costs nothing, there is literally only the creative aspect of it that is worth anything. And this is the same in, there's another sci-fi universe that is just as cheerful, and that's Ian M. Banks' The Culture series. And it's a very similar setup, except these guys are living on giant orbital worlds and such, so it's gone a bit further than Star Trek, and it's not Earth, Earth's not involved, they are pan-humans. But it's like, it's a similar thing that everything has been cracked. Science has the answers. You can literally go to a computer and turn and just materialize whatever you might need or whatever you design. So it's 3D printers taken to the next level.
Right.
So-
Yeah. So I just
Go
want
ahead.
to end with this quick summary of what a few lines from Star Trek: The Next Generation, so that we can get an idea of how like egalitarian it really is. It's the economics of the future are somewhat different. You see, money doesn't exist in the 24th century. The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. Material needs no longer exist. Poverty was eliminated a long time ago on Earth, and a lot of other things disappeared with it. Hopelessness, despair, cruelty. We've eliminated hunger, want, and the need for possessions. People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We've grown out of our infancy. The challenge is to improve yourself, enrich yourself. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. That's the whole reason why most of us like Star Trek.
Well, let me
That's,
ask this. Let me ask this just to round it up. Then off the back of that, Tom, and what we've been driving at up until this point. Let's presume that with blockchain technology, crypto economics, we can get to a digital world where there's abundance. That we all want that. But here's my question to you: even in that Star Trek world, and as an example for us in this world, where even with post scarcity abundance, you would fear that different digital societies would still want to have power over each other. What lessons can we, on for non-material reasons and whatever else, what lessons can we learn from Star Trek in how their system managed relationships, competing relationships, no doubt, but there was peace. Was there peace? And how did they manage it? And how can we learn from that in a blockchain post scarcity world where we can live together in different digital worlds and not create conflict or avoid conflict? Is there any lessons to what Star Trek did? Like, oh, let them be. Like, they're not causing us problems. Have their little shitty society if they want, or whatever it is. Is there any lessons that we can take from that and how we create this blockchain networked society world on Earth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically the taking the profit motive out of, and or not just the profit motive, but along with it, the idea of scarcity even being a thing. Once you remove that from the equation, like war over resources doesn't even really make sense. So then essentially it opens up a huge chasm or a vacuum through which you can just inject diplomacy, and that's exactly what they do on Star Trek. Like they always find a way to like satisfy both parties, or at least are always trying to whenever they come up against conflict. and it's always about diplomacy every step of the way, and at least in the next generation. The classic
But
series is a little bit different and stuff, but like
do you-
still, that's the generic.
is that
Once you
is
get
that
that out of there, yeah.
is that only when they bring in diplomacy? Only when sort of there is going to be an issue between different worlds? What we've been discussing so far is like, how would we deal with if 4chan wanted to trade children within their own system? How would Star Trek look at that? If they looked down on a planet from their starship and went, "Oh, I see down there they love to trade
Condescendingly.
children," condescendingly, but wouldn't
It would
intervene.
be
Okay,
right, because
condescendingly, but not
the
intervene.
prime directive is inherently, the prime directive means that you can't meddle with lesser civilizations, basically, and lesser societies that are less developed. So that
In other
means
words,
that
what ones that
any
haven't reached that singularity with massive cultural
yeah,
shift.
So does that answer
anytime that
Steve's
applies,
question
you're
then?
being condescending.
Does that
So
answer
I
does
guess it
that
would
answer
apply there.
Steve's dilemma then? From the very beginning, the prime directive should rule a blockchain network society world. Don't intervene in different digital societies. Let them be free, unless and until there's conflict between digital societies, and then that's when we have diplomacy.
Or when
But
they reach a certain point of maturity is usually the threshold. Like it's never even when they need us to intervene. They let whole civilizations and planets die because of the prime directive and tear themselves apart. But
okay,
so the ultimate goal is to not interfere, because that's what you have to let that happen. Like who are you to play God? And essentially that happens sometimes. People wind up
yeah,
worshiping the enterprise.
wonderful. That's the conclusion we came to. Wasn't it the other alchemist? Like we said,
Yeah.
that democracy is a bumpy road, and if the 4chan community want to be toxic, they'll burn themselves out, because they'll not be able to
More
trade
than
with us,
likely.
and they're more than likely burn themselves out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Does
You're
anyone
welcoming
disagree
a
with that
fire onto
view?
your own boat, when you try to force them to either integrate or whatever, you're literally taking a fire and bringing it onto your own boat, potentially.
I agree.
Right.
Does anyone here not agree with that type of future potential mode of operation for a network society blockchain world? Is anyone like, nah, Steve?
It's all about it's what Cole said before. It's all about reaching that point of mutual enriched mutual understanding, where education, it generally reaches a point that is far better advanced than it is currently. Because right now it's a lucky dip, and it's a lucky dip in that through your schooling and your education, you get the underpinning stuff you need to be able to critically think when you're an adult and you're exposed to what is essentially just psyops. You're constantly exposed to psyops. You're constantly the subject of a Darren Brown episode. Do you know what I mean? Darren Brown show, like a mentalist puppeteering you. And repetition and reinforcement of the things that really colour your mind, and it's only when you take a step away from whatever the source of that is that you actually write with your own thoughts, that you're free for that influence for a couple of weeks it takes as well.
So
So
let me
I'm not sure it's all that straightforward.
let me pull on your neoliberal heartstrings, and then we'll end it there, because we're coming up to the 3 hour mark. What happens in the Star Trek world, or in this blockchain world that we're envisioning, if the 4chan societies establishes a capitalist elite society within its community, it rapes children, and then it forms alliances with communities to share its system. That must exist in the Star Trek universe, and how do they deal with it? Do they still have a approach? And could that build momentum so that there's a whole galaxy of those kind of communities? Likewise, in the blockchain world, if we allow it and more hands off. Does anyone have an answer to that? Or
there's all kinds of different communities in the Star Trek universe that are either sometimes they're left alone, sometimes they wind up interfering. with the growth of other civilizations, and they have to mediate that, or sometimes it's like not even an organ. I remember there was an episode where there was like an inorganic organism that was like replicating itself, and they were hurting it somehow, and they didn't know why, and they spent the whole episode like some of them dying and like destroying the ship just to try to figure out how to save and also like get this thing out of the ship. And it's the concepts in it are so abstract, but like I think that's a good thing. It winds up keeping your mind open after you once you watch it and you understand the points that they try to make over and over again in different ways. It makes a lot of sense. And there's always going to be different communities that run different ways, and you have to just let them, because trying to force somebody to do something almost always has the opposite effect.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
This would be on a ship-to-ship level, though. The largest thing is they have the Federation, of course, which is essentially just like a galactic UN.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
even a United States or whatever. Like, yeah, just a bunch of different organizations that all share a common like desire to be diplomatic and
diplomatically resolve their issues rather than resort to conflict.
Even though all the major events are always like corruption within that, and like having to deal with the fact that some asshole always rises in the ranks, because that's how sociopaths operate.
Or there's some brain slug in all the hierarchy. Some alien brain slugs taking control, or so some super advanced species from the dimension has duplicated them and replaced them, or whatever. All the fun stuff.
Ridiculous.
Lovely. So we're coming up to the 3-hour mark. We've covered quite a lot there. I didn't think we'd get onto network societies. Cool.
Yay.
We got sci-fi as well, so that's awesome. So that's cool. Lovely chat. We covered quite a lot there. Holy crap! From privacy, lens protocol, WikiLeaks, truckers, the whole damn thing. So great. We'll have to break this into a 15-part series.
Yeah.
It's been interesting. It really has.
Yeah, I mean, I could
get
get fascinated.
You can get a lot out of this.
Oh, I remembered to press record.
Hey.
It was a little late though, but not that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took us a while to get.
Closing thoughts then before we finish. No. Any big thoughts that people want to get off their chest before we.
This is the same thing we say after each of these, Alex, and it's that it's not what exists right now that excites us, it's what's coming down the line. And what's really nice is seeing Cole here just echoing the same sentiments. He's really saying that from a different perspective. This is the first time we've spoken, isn't it, mate? And he's very much saying the same thing, and it's good to hear that we're not in our own little bubble at this point, going outside our own little echo chamber. So thanks.
Yeah, man.
Do you know what I think as well? I think that's a really good point. Like, and I think, I don't know what your experience is. I'll say this to Bemke and Cole, like, because you're a wee bit more into the crypto community and have been than Steve, but Steve also, like, but I feel like the crypto community, blockchain community, and folks that have our kind of politics there's a lot more solidarity in thinking like this than thinking big ideas and whatever else. And once you get into conversation, long form conversations like this, there is a lot more than not. So that's encouraging. It's great. So yeah. Okay, I think we'll leave it there.